big thank you to Representatives Baker and Burt. Thank you guys very much. I don't know if Mark is back. There he is. Thank you so much, Representative, for the tour of the countryside. I think what we'll do, committee, we're going to switch the agenda up just a little bit this afternoon, take up Interstate 80 wrap up conversation. And then we'll come back and spend a few minutes on towing this afternoon, although that is something that as an issue, we will push forward to November. So regarding the Interstate 80 matters wrap up, committee, I'd be interested in any thoughts that any of you guys have, having been out there on the site, having been on the stretch of I-80 between here and Green River. I have a notion that it would be helpful to this committee to find out what some of these options are estimated to cost us. In other words, if there's any way that our district folks here with the Department of Transportation could give us an estimate. I don't expect an actual detailed analysis or a whole bunch of engineering or anything like that, but I think a ballpark figure that would help us understand if we get that road that we were on today, if we get that up and passable, what is that going to take? What happens if we decide we want to go full bore and get that up to 55 miles an hour and make that an actual state road? And finally, what happens if we go from the tunnels to Rock Springs? Give us some options on what we can do on I-80. In other words, the senator from here who had to get back to work this afternoon indicated, why can't we look at paving down the middle of those lanes? I don't know. Let's find out what that might take. What does it take all the way up to a third lane coming and going between Green River and Rock Springs? And what are the possibilities that we could leverage some federal support for that? This is a tangled spot in I-80 often. Things get bottled up here and it shuts down I-80. And so anyway, that's just some of my thoughts, committee. What do you think? Representative O'Hearn, talk to me. What do you think?
I'd second that motion, all of the above. Let's find out what it's going to cost.
Mr. Co-Chairman, am I wandering around behind the farm animals or?
We won't go there,
Okay.
but I think that's a reasonable approach. I would ask the department, my guidance would be is, a reasonable calculation. Don't spend months doing this. You know what paving costs, you know what dirt work costs, you already know what's out there. So just some of those ideas. But I wouldn't write off potentially other ideas.
Yeah, Mr. Gillette, I'm looking back your direction. I think by November, here's what I sense from the committee. Gentlemen, I think we've got some interest in trying to help this part of the world over here. But it's going to require some things. First off, we've got to know what we're looking at. I mean, what are the options between here and the community of Green River? And then, and only then, are we going to reach out to the entities here and find out if they're willing to step up themselves before the state can roll in and try to help them. So I think that's a big factor. It has been on so many other projects that we've worked on together, committee. What has the local community done for itself? And then we'll come in and help. But many things to think about. But the first thing we got to find out is what the heck are we looking at? What are the options that we might be able to coddle something together and help these communities over here and help the I-80 corridor. Mr. Co-Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could add to that, the thing is we need to look a lot to the future here too. This part of the state is going to grow tremendously. A number of the trona mines are expanding and have major expansion plans. There's plans for a major, at least one, probably more hydrogen facilities in this area. I think this area will get some impact from the power plant going on Kemmer. So Southwest Wyoming is growing, and I think it's going to continue to grow. I'm not saying it's another boom, which we all would love, but I think we need to also look to the future of planning for that impact in the area. You know, the project we looked at yesterday south of Green River, I think is going to take some infrastructure work. And I think we need to keep that in mind as we go forward. I think we need to start looking at some more specifics to actually work at. And did we do something to offend Senator Anderson?
Well, I don't know. He's speaking of farm animals. You know, I think he's looking for them. We committee, any additions or subtractions to Representative Burt? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, other than look at here in Sweetwater County, you know, we're bringing in Caltech, another big company coming through, and looking at Sweetwater County, not just, you know, not to put off how little this road might be used. I mean, Sweetwater County's, it jumps between third, but we're usually fourth within the GDP for the state. And it's only going to continue to grow with everything coming in. So the longer we wait, and we keep hearing it's going to take time, well, it's taken since 2008. I think we've had enough time. So I think there should be something we look into.
Well, Representative, thanks for that. And I do, as I mentioned, I sat on this committee all those years ago, and so this has been an issue since then, and we've done nothing but double the traffic on I-80. And I'll bet it has almost doubled since then. But so it's definitely time, and I think that the Transportation Committee owes itself to find out and push for anything we can do in this part of the world. And so, Director Reiner, I hope that makes sense. Please come forward and ask us any questions, or you know, direct us otherwise. But I think we just would like to see what the options might be here. And I wonder if your district folks who live here every day might not have some ideas we haven't thought of.
You bet, Mr. Chairman. We'll just take that for action and come back with a report next time. Really, what I copied was, you know, estimate of, you know, a couple different options.
Yeah.
And so we'll let the sort of professional engineers work through those, everywhere from maybe a gravel to 55 to something faster to modifications to the interstate. And then certainly was tracking the discussion of, is there some federal funding that might be available in terms of options or support.
Thank you. I think that would really be helpful, Director, and it might be something that's got to be taken into, in fact, it would be ongoing for a long time if we decide to do something, but that'll be a great first start. And
Okay.
we'll look forward to that in November.
You bet.
Thank you, committee, and Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, on page 8 of the presentation, there's gravel roadway costs, paved gravel roadway, right down to paved roadway, but it's from $2008. So I'm assuming they would just upgrade that to $2023, which would considerably change that, I bet. Thank you.
Might have
Yeah.
gone up just a bit, I suspect.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that some of that won't be too time consuming, and given the time of year and everything else, but that'll be really helpful to the committee and helpful for this part of the world too, I think, to start leaning into it. Thank you, Director, and
Yes,
thanks
sir.
again
Thank
to
you.
the guys who helped us get out there and look around. Committee, I want to go back and pick up the issue of towing. That was an interim topic that we spent some time on, you might remember, in our first meeting. And we gave a subcommittee some time to at least get together and visit about this. Mr. Co-Chairman, were you on that subcommittee? And if you'd like to offer any thoughts on this issue, and
I thought you were also on it. Okay.
well, yeah, but
So-
I'm chairing the meeting, and so
Okay,
you know,
yes,
you
you
get-
can,
yeah, there
you can
go.
direct, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the subcommittee did meet during the interim, discuss towing issues. Talked about concepts and ideas, nothing specific. We don't have a bill draft. The department is coming out with new rules. And I think the final decision is we need to look at what those rules look like after they go through the whole review process before we would be interested in writing new legislation. And at that point, we would probably try to write as least intrusive legislation as possible. There's already rules in that out there to govern non-consensual towing. And I think that's the approach we took, not necessarily wait and see, but we want to let the group that came up with the new rules finish that process before we step in the middle of it and maybe change rules that took a lot of time to set up and establish and that. So I think I would ask the director if he had an idea of when those rules might be released in general.
Mr. Chairman, they're in the review process right now.
Okay.
And so then they'll have to go down to the AG's office again and to the governor's office. I can maybe get you a better estimate with a call to my staff and just maybe the next time I'm up here, I'll update you on that.
Okay, Director, do you think we'd be ready by, say, the meeting in November? If we need to write legislation, that's the last opportunity we have to do it. Because after that, we go into session and we can't write committee legislation on the fly. It would have to be individual bills. Do you think we'll have put it this way, the rules substantially enough completed that if we need to do legislation, we will know what we need to do?
Mr. Chairman, my sense would be, if we aren't done, we should be really, really close to the very, very final draft. And so I think it would be enough in my mind to shape some legislation, because with my knowledge of what's in those current rules and the discussion that we've had this interim, my sense is, and recommendation would be that we prime the pump for some potential legislation. Because I don't think the rule set as they're currently postured answers the issues that have been presented to us for this last year. And so I think we probably need a better tool in our toolbox.
So I think, Mr. Chairman, with that said, probably get the subcommittee to take a good hard look at those proposed rules. We have some concepts for legislation to then have staff prepare at our direction legislation to enhance those rules and have it ready to go for November.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's, we're not passing on the issue committee. It's just that, boy, what a deep pool of water you dive into, in this whole part of the world. And I'm hesitant to knee-jerk a piece of legislation that may or may not fit by the time we get a rule out. I think that we could, in November, several of us pick up a bill and take it forward based on how it fits with that rule. So I like that plan, and committee, I hope that makes sense. I just think, I just felt like we're not quite ready to draft legislation yet. So.
Okay, you got people.
Representative Baker first, I think, and then we'll.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to add to that, because I was sitting on that group and I do, just looking at my notes, recall that we did discuss a couple different things. We talked a little bit about the hourly versus mileage billing for the tow companies versus the price per pound. And I don't think we were, as a group, we decided we weren't looking at legislation there, but I think that there was a little bit of talk about the dispute resolution and the towing authority coordinator and allowing maybe through statute, giving them some authority to be able to adjudicate some of the towing issues. So just want to make the committee aware that was a little bit more based on my notes of what the discussion was. So, and then there was a little bit also about the decal and the rotation and maybe coming up with a decal requirement or something like that too. So.
Representative, that's very helpful. Thank you. Appreciate that. And you might remember on that particular topic, we did talk about multiple ownership of wrecking companies. We do have some issues that I think we can tackle. We just weren't sure, Director, where the rule process might take us and how deep into any of those issues, if at all, the rule might have gotten to. So.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think you're wise. Let's take a look at, the comments we received after that public meeting are being adjudicated. So far, we didn't think there's anything fatal because it's possible sometimes working those rules and regs that there's a big enough issue that comes up that you start over again if you can't adjudicate. And so the initial read by my staff was that we'd be okay. And so that's my sense is I think we're progressing and we should be able to take a good look at that and then shape some potential legislation for what's probably not in there.
Go ahead, Mr.
So, and
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Dad, I'm looking at my notes from that meeting, Dad, what Representative Baker said is also, I think we were looking at codifying the task force that already exists to keep that in place as a board. I don't know if I'd even call it a board or a commission, but to keep that group in place in order to resolve some of these issues on an ongoing basis. They don't have enforcement power, but it does codify that they exist and that they should continue to exist. And most of my other notes were pretty much what Representative Baker had to say. And that we had a couple things on posting of fees and decals and some other things. So we'll see what the rules look like. And I think we have enough from that group, then we can go in, as I said, as little legislation as possible to resolve the issues.
Well, and just not to get too far in the weeds, Mr. Co-Chairman, but you might recall when we began to talk about consistent fees, like many other industries in Wyoming, the travel industry is different in Teton County than it is in Natrona County. So you get into all of that. And so, I just want to make sure if we draft something that it's a good piece of legislation that's going to help. Yeah. That's really the concern I had was, hey, let's not knee jerk something. Let's make sure that we're going to hit the bullseye with it. So committee, anything from you guys? I do want to go to some public comment. Director, thank you for your thoughts on it. We're certainly willing to listen to any comments that might help direct us in November, but I think that's where this issue is gonna go. We'll take it up during that meeting, and it may be that we'll want to have a piece of legislation that everybody can be aware of. And we'll see which one of us may want to take something forward. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Anderson.
do we have a report from that working group or is it just all everybody's memories?
We did not draft a report, no. Let's go to public comment. Public comment? Andy, come on forward. We know who you are, but if you state your name and get up close to that microphone, that'd be great, just for the record.
I'm Andy Bird. I'm the chairman of the TAB and auto end repair out of Cameron, Wyoming. We're trying to deal with the towing and the overpricing and this sort of stuff. But a lot of this has been brought on by our insurance companies dumping. By them not, well, for instance, right now, we've got a load of French fries sitting at 5 below zero for 44 days. That storage, fuel, everything else goes against that. They don't want it, but how can we dump it or that. You, I called the insurance commission, which years ago, the legislature passed the rule of insurance dumping. Well, everybody's so new in there, they don't know what you're talking about. I used it at one time. We got to work all this in along with bringing our towing together. Storage yards, all this stuff, it costs money. And when you talk about putting a bill for the whole state, when Jackson, Casper are way higher price than Kimmer. Well, Kimmer's starting to raise their prices pretty high, but with land, but all this stuff's got to go into what we got to have. And it takes a lot of people to decide what was the best for everybody.
Well, Andy, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. We're going to keep an ear to the ground, look, learn and listen. And we'll take this up as soon as we see the rule in November, and we'll try to, if we decide to draft something up, obviously you guys will see it and there'll be plenty of time to work that, and we'll go forward with something at that time. So.
And I've
Appreciate
got
you
one
being-
more thing that goes on.
Sure. Didn't mean to interrupt you. Go
The
ahead.
highway patrol. You need to keep them because I get tired of training them. And that's a real fact, because we work with them and we rely on them and they rely on us. And it's something that they need compensated for a lot they do.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
Thank
Andy.
you.
Yep. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Further public comment? Good afternoon.
There we go.
There you go. Okay, please
Uh,
introduce yourself. We know who you are, by golly, but we need it for the record.
Okay. Dave Rose, I'm president of the Wyoming Towing Recovery Professionals, also co-chair of the Towing Advisory Board and owner of Big House Towing in Cheyenne. On behalf of the Towing Association, we'd like to thank you for taking up this matter. There is some glaring issues that we've been working on with the Towing Advisory Board. These rules processes that have been going on for several years, at least 10 years, since they were going to change the rules. Like Director Reiner said, we're past the public comment period and we're kind of heading towards the checkered flag of getting this thing nailed down. And Representative Burkhart said, he was chairman of our subcommittee, and I think by taking a wait, not necessarily wait and see, but wait to see how this shakes out before the November meeting, so that you can come up with some legislation that's going to help. I think that these rules are going to help us out and clear up a lot of gray areas. And I want to also reinforce what Andy had said, he said about the highway patrol. We're working closely with them, and that's kind of the last thing they need to do is babysit us. And we both got better things to do. And I'm looking forward to seeing where this comes out, and hopefully it'll better not only our service to the motoring public, but to the highway patrol also.
Dave, thanks for all your efforts.
You bet.
We I'm optimistic that we can get to a place where we can help any side of the argument, you know, that's really our goal, is just to set up a better framework, and thanks for all the time you've given it. The task force has worked hard on this, I know, so. Committee, any questions for Mr. Rowe? Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. This important committee on this important topic. I want to ask you if you're satisfied that the pending rule will adequately address the area that I've heard a lot of concern expressed about in terms of responsibility and follow through, and I think it was alluded to in the previous speaker's comments, you know, about cleanup, site cleanup, accident cleanup.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Henderson, yes, I do. This is already in state statute that we're to clean up the accident scene and all the debris associated with it. There has been some hazardous material stuff that's came up, like we talked about earlier today. You know, the truck traffic is doubled. I'm sure it's doubled. And you get a box van going down the highway, nobody knows what's in that thing until it wrecks. And we've had some mixed loads, and, you know, so some of these cleanups could get pretty expensive, especially you start bringing in hazmat and having to rejuvenate the dirt and haul stuff off and dispose of it properly. But once again, in 2015, the legislature put the burden of proof on the tow companies to make, you know, if there's any disputes, we have to defend that at our own cost. And as far as I know, there's not much that's went through court of law on that, but it could come about to where we have to prove, yeah, this is really what our bill is. One thing that Andy alluded to is we get a lot of insurance companies that sit on these accidents, whether they're going through their chain of command or whatever, and the storage bills get pretty high, especially when we're having to take care of try to preserve a load. You know, it costs quite a bit to store something at 0 degrees for 45 days, like Andy said. And the bills get really high quick, but we're in contact with them the whole time, from the day it happens to whenever they pick it up. So, you know, to limit us on that would be pretty tough. We would like, you know, to see something maybe in legislation where to reaffirm this insurance dumping, because I don't think there's anybody in the state that hasn't had to deal with insurance companies sitting on a bill for a long time until it's just gotten outrageous. Even in our minds, it's kind of outrageous, and we negotiate those on a regular basis. We don't want their stuff any more than they want to lose it. So I think we might want to look at that on other legislation too.
Dave, has the task force looked at the insurance side, holding insurance companies accountable in some way? Is there any thoughts that have come out of the task force on that front?
Chairman, no, not yet. We've been working so hard on these, getting these rules through, that we haven't had a chance to address that. It has came up in conversation, but as far as coming up with some kind of idea on how to deal with that, nothing has been brought to the table yet.
Okay. Anything else for Dave? Really appreciate you. Thanks.
You bet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Further public testimony, come on forward. Be ready to go. We're gonna plug on through this and get on with the afternoon. Thank you.
Thomas Mullen, owner of I-80 Towing and Fort Towing in Cheyenne and Elk Mountain. Mr. Chairman, just a couple quick points, because I know this stuff has been battered back and forth. As far as the policies that they have, there's a lot of stuff to go through on that. There's insurance issues, the price per pound issues. There's a lot of things that are already covered under law that are not being enforced at all. Because I thought the Sherman Act and the antitrust should cover a lot of the multi-company things. You bring it up to the AG's office and it gets thrown back and forth. AG, oh, that's patrol. Patrol says that's not us, that's them. And it's going back and forth like this was back in 2015, because all this came up before. And it went up. They said, well, let's try to do a law, which was overburdening, I thought. So of course it was tabled and then put on the wayside. Here we are. What has it been, 8 years later? We're still right back. Nothing's gotten better. And this, you're looking at it again in November. By then snow's flying and the fear is again, it's going to be tabled again. Then you have all these entities that are going to come out here because it's money time in Wyoming again. All the snow's flying and they're popping up with pieces of land and saying, I'm a tow company. And then the agencies that's supposed to be monitoring it, enforcing the law, sign off on it, and they enable these people to run illegally. So it's just a lot of we don't know where to go as a company, because I've reached out to legislators before, AG's office, patrol, and I get bounced around like a ping pong. So it's just frustrating to say the least. And I just don't want it to come in a draft form and then get kicked back, and then we're waiting another 2 or 3 years on this, because antitrust is in effect. You bring it up, nobody really knows nothing about it. You bring up the piece about people operating illegally without even being on business property, but yet when the patrol signs off on that, they're giving that company the right to operate it as a business in Wyoming, and they're being forced on the public. And then other companies that have to go through other processes to run as a legal business, we get penalized, because Carbon County, I had to get oh God, what's it called? Conditional use permits and everything to even operate as a tow company in Carbon County. Yet you've got people that buy a piece of land, say, there's my deal. Nobody lives there or nothing, or they say my storage yard's over here when they're operating out of over here. And a lot of this I would think could be handled with current policy. And once again, it's not being. So all I have to say, we'll just wait till November and hopefully I'll see y'all again and go from there.
Tom, thank you. Appreciate that. And I know there's people taking some notes, and we're going to do everything we can by the time we get to November to see if we can't give some help on one side or the other. We want to do it right, because you're right. This has been going on a long time, and there's just issues with this industry that are difficult. So we'll give it our best effort.
Yes, Mr. Kane, thank you.
Appreciate it. Any questions for Mr. Mullen? Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Further public testimony on this issue? Anything further? Is there anybody online, Heather, that wants to testify? We will go to Mr. Odekoven a little bit later. Please tell us who you are and be close to the microphone, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Melanie McCoy. I am one of the board members for the WTRP, the Wyoming Towing Recovery Professionals. I also manage Elk Mountain Towing, Pronghorn Towing, and Ebner Towing out of Rollins and Elk Mountain. We, as the Wyoming Towing Professionals, just want to say thank you for all the hard work you guys did in the interim committee. We are in agreement with your proposal to push through legislation to solidify the TAB board and the DRC, and hope to see that done, because we believe that is really going to be key to curbing a lot of the bad behaviors that we've all been worrying about over the past few years. So just in final comment, I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Appreciate it. Okay, let's go to Mr. Odekoven. Heather, can you let him in, please? Good afternoon, Mr. Odekoven.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Can
Byron
you hear us?
Odekoven.
And if so, great, you're all set.
Very good.
See
Thank
ya.
you. Byron Odekoven, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. when I initially signed up to testify before the committee, I wasn't sure where the discussion was going to land. So at this point, I'm anxious to see what you take up in November, the potential bill that you'll have, and we stand ready to assist you in the deliberation on working on that bill in November. So if you do not have any questions for me, that's all I have for you, sir.
Byron, thanks for being here this afternoon. Thank you. Anything, committee? Okay, we'll be talking with you as we go along then. Thanks, Byron.
Thank you.
Committee, any other public testimony? Okay, we're going to close public testimony. I think, committee, what we could do is if we move forward on any sort of draft from the subcommittee, for example, we'll make sure that the committee is very much aware of what's being drafted up. It will not be taken forward as a committee bill in November. I agree with the co-chairman that's too late at that point, but there might be some of us who wish to take that forward, and I think we can still be effective and do some work on it. So does that make sense, Mr. Co-chairman? Okay, we're going to move on. We've got some bills to consider this afternoon, but this is the other change in the agenda that I want to make on behalf of a couple of folks who are here to testify. We're going to take up the off-road vehicles first, and then come back to 4 of the bills that you see underneath the statutory updates. So we had a working group that also got together on rights of way rules and policies. And I would be interested in any thoughts from the subcommittee on the right of way, how that conversation went and what was discussed. Does anybody remember or have thoughts about work that was done there?
So was I took the last one. So, Mr.
Yeah, but you
Chairman,
did such a good job. I think you should take this
Okay.
one.
so, Mr. Chairman, we had a long discussion, as you know, on the whole right-of-way issue. And it's not as straightforward and easy as it might seem. The department does have rules on right-of-way access. However, the subcommittee felt that we need some legal opinions on some of this, of where we stand from a legal standpoint on using the right-of-ways, on potentially charging for use of the right-of-ways, how much that should be if we would do it, and a variety of those things. So at this point, where we left it was that the legislature would look at a opinion on how the right-of-way issue might conform or not conform to Article 16, Section 6 of the Wyoming Constitution. And the department was going to ask for a Attorney General opinion. And that's where we left it at this point in time on those right-of-ways.
So, Mr. Co-Chairman, in addition to that, my thought was that maybe we ask our staff to consider a white paper that could be brought to us in November so that we could get a look at any interpretations, Heather, that you might be able to make on this right-of-way issue. Not just the constitutionality, but maybe even some comparisons of what might be going on elsewhere around us. I think really what it boils down to, committee, is that some of the broadband that is being allowed into the right of way, we've essentially treated broadband as a utility. And I think some of the concern that was talked about is if we're allowing that in the right of way, should we then be forced to allow everything else in the right of way? And so that's what I think, Heather, you could consider for us. And anything that you could bring to us would be enlightening, I'm sure. So I think the initiative by the former governor and the way we've approached it and what we've got in statute, and I would just remind the committee, we've got a lot of broadband to lay down over these next few years. um, With the infrastructure package that we've been given and whatever, so. I hope that makes sense. I don't really, there again, I don't think we were ready to draft anything.
No. We, Mr. Chairman, we felt we needed the opinion of staff, this white paper you had mentioned, plus an AG's opinion, on the entire issue, because the right of ways are technically state property. And the way I've looked at it is could a contractor, they're sitting here, so I'll refer to them. Could a contracting company decide there's an extra cubicle in the Hirschler building and just walk in and sit down and set up their office saying, hey, you allow free access to the right of ways, which is state property. I want to use this state property. I know that sounds a little far fetched, but to me, it's kind of the same thing. You can't put a house on the right of way. And that there are rules in that, but where do we draw the line? Where do we may need to step in with legislation? And I was the one who raised the constitutional issue of, do we conflict with that section of the Constitution? So I think we need those opinions. That's what the subcommittee decided, that before we could do any legislation, we needed to have those opinions.
Okay, questions? Okay, committee, we're gonna move up a notch on the agenda and go to off-road recreational vehicles. There are a couple of drafts for our consideration. It would be my sense that the off-road recreational vehicle operation bill is something that we could look at in our third meeting, simply because I'd be interested in what that white paper would find for us. I wanted to ask Heather, do we have anybody waiting? I know that this off-road vehicle issue has been a big one over here in the southwest part of the state. So I don't want to miss anybody who wants to, is that Mark back there? Mark is here. Hi, Mark, good to see you. I think we'd love to hear, let's go to some public comment on the right-of-way rules. And then what I want to do, committee, is take up the safety and insurance bill. I think that's one that we could work today and consider. And before we do that, let's take a little bit of public comment on the off-road recreational vehicle operation. We just
Oh, we had it. Okay, never mind.
I just thought
Okay.
for here, see,
Yes.
right of way issue, and then off-road. We
Ma-
could,
Mr. Chairman?
go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, for the people here, our discussion is until we get the resolution of the off-road, or not the off-road, I apologize, of the right-of-way issue, we need to not take any action on the off-road recreational vehicle operation. Because if we do legislation that says we're going to do this, and then we find that maybe we do have a constitutional issue with that use, we probably need to get all of our ducks in a good row before we go passing any legislation. So just so everyone here knows, I would recommend that we take testimony on the operation issue, but not take action on the bill at this time. If that fits with your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I gotta tell you, I don't think we have a problem, but I think it's worthwhile for us to make sure we don't. I think what we'll find is that we're probably good to go the way we're operating today. And if so, then in November, we can push forward on, if we want to help the southwest part of the state on the Southwest Trails, for example. I think then we can go and feel good about presenting that on the floor of either one of the chambers. I think this afternoon, I would like to hear from the department. But specifically today, I think we'd like to take up the off-road safety and insurance bill. That is number 0019.
Mr. Chairman,
So Senator Anderson,
are you saying that 0020 will move to November?
yes,
We'll deal with 19 today?
that's correct.
Okay.
We won't let anybody speak on this one, if we can.
I do, that's what I referenced when I said public comment. So Heather, hang on just 1 second before you present 19 to us. 20, if there's any public comment, I would love to hear it now on the off-road recreational vehicle operation piece. Okay. These are two different bills we're talking about, the operation piece, and then we're going to take up safety and insurance here in a minute. But I don't, for those who came to testify on the previous bill, I want to take testimony.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Catherine Wilkinson, excuse me, here right now on behalf of All West Communications and Silver Star Communications. I had a comment if it would be permissive on the public comment period, just on the right of way in general, but not on that specific bill of 20.
Absolutely, please.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here today. We appreciate the opportunity to continue the conversations about the right of way as they're a very important resource for Wyoming. I am here on behalf of several broadband companies, All West Communications, Silver Star Communications, Lumen, Tri-County Telephone Company, Union, and Visionary Broadband, and simply asking that as the committee goes forward, that the industry has a seat at the table to continue this very important discussion. There's a lot of money that is coming into the state for broadband and millions of dollars in federal funding. And in an effort to deploy that broadband to unserved and underserved areas in the state, it's important that there's a fair, comprehensive policy that all industry has had an opportunity to vet in the creation of this policy. So we look forward to the continued conversation, and thank you. We look forward to working with you.
Catherine, thank you. I think you can tell why we're being a little bit cautious there. But committee, any questions for Ms. Wilkinson? All righty, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any other comments on the right-of-way issue or the off-road operation bill that we're just going to put that off until November? But please come forward. Mr. Soro, anything?
Good afternoon, committee, Chairman Lannon, Chairman Burkhart. Mark Tesoro with Southwest Wyoming Off-Road Trails, also called SWAT, SWOT, from Evanston. Thanks again for the opportunity to present in front of the committee. I did my first meeting last year to the committee in Rollins, and then of course at the legislature. And this is the third time I've had the opportunity to present in front of you. Again, Southwest Wyoming Off-Road Trails is an economic development project for the communities of Southwest Wyoming. Access into and out of the communities is paramount for this project. We have been working very closely since the inception of this project over 2 years ago with the State Trails Office, with YDOT, with many different partners and stakeholders, including county commissioners, chambers of commerce, city councils, in order to move this project forward. Since the last meeting that I presented at, the communities of Evanston, Lyman, Camer, Mountain View, LaBarge, Marbleton, and Big Piney have all approved off-road vehicles for use on city streets. And the communities of Rock Springs, Green River, Pinedale, and several other communities in Carbon County have also heard about this project and are pending any movement in the direction of allowing these vehicles on city streets, depending on the work with YDOT and the legislation that is before us. The community of Superior, I talked to them on the way over here today. They are going to approve the off-road vehicles on city streets with the state of Wyoming's $15 off-road sticker. That their third reading will be next month. The community of Granger is also on board at looking at something like this. the counties that have accepted and enrolled their county roads into the off-road trail system, Uena County has about 23 roads. Lincoln County has almost all of its roads. Fremont County has all of its roads. Carbon County has all of its roads. Sweetwater County is working on something similar. So again, a regional movement to allow these vehicles to come into the state, these riders to come in and spend their money here. Really nothing new for our surrounding states, but something that we just haven't done here in Southwest Wyoming or in the state for that matter. That's the reason that the state has, from many different levels, from the governor's office to the state trails office to the to YDOT being with us as a partner to help move this project forward. I know when we talk about rights of way, I mean, it's easy to think maybe the right of way from Kemmer to LaBarge, using that space inside the highway fence. But the right of way also includes downtown Evanston, downtown LaBarge, being able to access through that community for riders to get things like fuel, a bite to eat, to stay, to benefit the community. That's really what has to take place and has to happen. As far as stakeholders to the table, I've mentioned this on many occasions, but everyone from Game and Fish, BLM, Forest Service, even the Weed and Pest, Wyoming Weed and Pest has been partners with us on this project. As far as legislators that have been here, Senator Dockstader is on his way. I think he was planning on being here at 3:30. So this bump up in the agenda, unfortunately, I don't think he'll be here in time. But Senator Dockstader has been a very good partner with us on this project since almost day one. Senator Schuler, of course, Representative Burt, Senator Kolb, Representative Heiner, Representative Ayer, Representative Worf, Senator Baldwin, Representative Summers, have all been at meetings with myself or our group to talk about moving this project forward. And again, I would just ask for your consideration. I know that you're talking about moving it into November, and I appreciate that. I really do. This is a benefit to the communities and a benefit to the states. And I guess I would stand for any questions.
So, Mr. Cesaro, thank you very much. And I'm sorry we're putting this off, but the target, of course, is the session. And,
Sure.
and so we certainly have time to do that. A couple of things that I wanted to throw out. First of all, my sympathies to you. You lost a really good friend this summer. He was a friend of ours too. And I know that Rick Schuler was very instrumental in helping you to get this effort off the ground. And so our hearts go out to the folks over in Uena, especially Senator Schuler. So that said, I did want to say that over the weekend, I took a bunch of bachelors up to the Black Hills for a bachelor party, about 11 of us. Our son's getting married here in a little bit. And I was fascinated over there in the Black Hills that they are doing exactly what you're trying to get done. There are so many 4x4s running around, and they're all in town and on every road that I could see. I just thought that was interesting. It's a big, big deal. And I was going to ask you if you knew anything about how they got that going in the Black Hills over there. It's a big deal there, kind of like Western Colorado. So.
Yes, Senator Lannon, again, my tribute to Senator Schuler and to her husband, Rick. Rick Schuler is a person that I've known for many years. He actually was the person that came and graded my 7th grade science fair project. And I've known him, worked on the Scenic Byway with him, the Scenic Byway Committee. And he was the first person I called about trying to help get SWAT launched and off the ground. And Senator Schuler and Rick have been fantastic partners to move this project. You mentioned the Black Hills, and kind of curious, I did come across this. This is a magazine that I found in a hotel in Evanston. There were 4 copies of it there on the magazine rack, and I took all 4 copies. And this is Eastern Idaho Off-Road Guide. And so I got back to my office. I immediately called the publisher in here and asked them if I wanted to ask him if he could tell me about how they've got this publication off the ground and what they've done. The person that I talked to was a lady named Chris Sheets, and she said, well, he really had nothing to do with it. He was the one that put his name on the magazine, but I'm the one that has done much of the work. And she is a member of the Teton Yellowstone Travel and Tourism Board. And they have published this magazine for many years. I think it's probably 4 different issues, but they publish it, 20,000 copies that go out to the Intermountain area. And I said, we are working on a project similar to this in Southwest Wyoming, where we would like to connect to places throughout the state, different communities, different historical sites, different places to see. And she said, this is fantastic. We'd love to be involved. They would like to see something in Idaho connect with what we're doing in Wyoming. And if you notice the back, of course, you can't see this, but this is the backside of the Tetons. And we could be doing this now in Southwest Wyoming. Off-road motorized travel or motorized travel in Idaho is $1 billion industry. And I mentioned this last year, 1/3 of that is snowmobiling, 1/3 of that is power boating, and 1/3 of that is off-road vehicles and the trails that they have in Idaho. And we're just working on moving that project into something that's similar.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Any questions of Mr. Tesoro? Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, committee. Appreciate your
And
time.
by the way, the Senate president will get some deference when he gets here. I'm sure we can squeeze a little bit of time for him.
Of course.
Any other public comment on the rights of way issues? The bill that we're going to just put on the table for now on recreational vehicle operation. Okay. Any further public comment? We'll come back to Senator Dockstader if he gets here, and he's always welcome. So let's move on. And Heather, if you'd like to present to us and kind of walk us through 0019, off-road vehicle safety and insurance. So that's the one we will take up. Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I have in front of me, and the version that I plan on going through with the committee is working draft 0.5 of 23 LSO-0019. This bill draft, the catch title, off-road recreational vehicles, safety and insurance. And so this focuses on that in particular for the off-road recreational vehicles, as far as requiring some specific insurance and safety equipment for these vehicles when they're operated on a public road, or a right of way. Should be a comma there. Excuse me. Public road, right of way, street. Oh, sorry. No, there should not be a comma there. I apologize. A public road, right of way, street, road, or highway, and providing for an effective date. So what this bill draft does is it goes into the first, the several sections I'll go over are in Title 31, which is the title that looks at vehicles and what's required of vehicles. And specifically, we're in Title 31, Chapter 5. So the first one is the first statute is 31-5-952, which deals with horns and warning devices. And this section, or the subsection E, which is on page 2 that is addressed, is specifically, it actually strikes some language that had omitted, that had made this apply only to dirt bikes, and not to other off-road vehicles. And so instead, this simply by striking the language that you see at the top of page 2 and inserting off-road vehicles off-road recreational vehicles that are operated pursuant to the statute that's further on, that is about off-road vehicle operation, that includes all of them in requiring this horn as a warning device. Very similar language in for a muffler and for mirrors, you'll see they had carved out that only certain off-road vehicles were required, but instead this is just making it apply to all of them. And on the language that's happening for both the horns, mufflers, and mirrors that were on this page too. And then the statute that they were referring to, actually back on page 2, that talking about vehicles, that they apply to off-road recreational vehicles that are operated pursuant to 31-5-1601. Well, this 31-5-1601 is what you see on page 3. And what's being addressed on in the 1601 on this section of A, paragraph 1, is that they're requiring some insurance. As far as what you see on the top of page 4 is that what's required is proof of financial responsibility as provided in statutes 31-9-402 through 31-9-415. That's the section of the Wyoming statutes that refer to the vehicle insurance or some sort of proof of financial responsibility for vehicles. It could be a bond, it could be insurance, and what have you, but it's a broad category. I also think, though, just to preempt a comment, that is quite likely what we will have some comments on as far as some how the proof of financial insurance or financial responsibility is going to be worded according to the committee, because this does refer to the section of the statutes in that 31-9-402. I'm on page 4 at line 4 through 31-9-415, and that's the proof of financial responsibility for vehicles. And so there are some refinements. I'm not, without making an argument or what have you, but to the maybe the committee might want some differences there in the wording. And then the other paragraph that is addressed here in this 31-5-1601 is paragraph 4, which addresses some additional safety equipment of adequate braking devices. And what happens is as the statute was originally drafted, it addressed the braking devices, but then we insert the cross-reference to the safety equipment that was addressed on pages 2, and as far as a horn and a mirror pursuant to what you saw, the changes that were made on those previous pages. Oh, and then there is a staff comment that the insurance, regardless of what the committee decides of how the insurance should be required, whether it's just a reference to that section so that folks have the option of coming up with whether it's a bond or insurance policy, it's still, because it's in the way it's drafted in this section, that this is only actually addressing this off-road vehicles that are operated in the public road right of way, a street or a road or highway. It does not require insurance on insurance and safety features in either of these for operation if there is of these vehicles on an off-road recreational vehicle trail. And that may be fine. It's just something I was pointing out to the committee. It's when these vehicles go onto some sort of a public road with other vehicles that this safety equipment and insurance is required as drafted. It could change if that's the committee's prerogative. But so that's what this does. It adds some safety equipment and some insurance requirements.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a minimum speed limit or a maximum speed limit in any of state statute 31-9-415 or 954? I'm just wondering if I can put a mirror and a horn and insure my lawnmower if I get all liquored up and my wife doesn't let me drive the car.
Mr. Chairman, Representative O'Hearn, there's a definition in statute, which I can just grab if I can go over to the statute books for an off-road recreational vehicle. And it says what's included and what isn't. I don't think that your lawnmower, even with the safety equipment and with the proper insurance, would not having seen your lawnmower, but it might not be included.
Not unless it was modified greatly. So there you go. Further questions, Representative Baker, and then we'll come back to Representative Overmuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Heather, I appreciate the comments. Do you know in states that are moving this direction, have they also made this requirement on the off-road trails?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker, I do not have any idea whether they have or not.
So-
Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker, there are some requirements of vehicles on the off-road trails, but and they are in this 1601, but it just was making sure that the committee was knowing that the way that these changes were made is that they're not they're not required. They're not all required. Some safety equipment is required on an off-road vehicle for an off-road trail. And I can look that up as soon as I get back to my seat. So that it's not like they're just completely without any guidance. There are some in the 1601, in fact.
Representative Overmuller and then Senator Furphy, and we'll come back to Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Heather, could you, on page 4, the line 2 through 4, for my benefit, could you just go through the explanation of the new section there? Starting with and proof of financial responsibility, just flesh that out as what they're talking about.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Representative Overmuller. I realize you pointed to page 4, but just to go back to the beginning of the sentence, because
Yeah.
it's quite a long one, I'm just going to flip back to page 3.
Okay.
And so page 3, this particular section or sentence starts with that. Oh, sorry, I apologize. The beginning of the sentence is right there at the top of page 4. And that off-road recreational vehicles operated on roadways designated as trails shall be subject to the user registration fee that is prescribed in a different section entirely. That's the existing language. And then, and proof of financial responsibility as provided in these statutes 31-9-402 through 31-9-405, and shall not be deemed a motorcycle as defined in this is the definition for a particular type of motorcycle or a particular type of vehicle and another one. So why don't I grab 31 to be able to tell you exactly what those are.
You know, committee, I actually was on one of these pieces of equipment up on Union Pass. And a lot of these were around. And I can't remember if they all had all of this. But almost every one of them would dip on and off the roads up there. So I'm interested in how this continues on and what our discussion's going to be, just simply because I'm just not sure where we stand now. But anyway, Heather, did you find what you were looking for? Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the requirement as written in the inserted text that's underlined as far as 31-9-402 through 31-9-415, that section of or that article is proof of financial responsibility, and that includes types of proof, the certificate of insurance carrier, non-residents, a liability policy defined. I'm just kind of reading the headings of each of those of the statutes that's included in that range of statutes. Liability policy defined, required coverage and additional clauses, cancellation or termination of insurance, and exclusion of named driver, accepted as in things that have an exception, not accepted, accepted policies, surety bonds, cash and securities deposited with the director, proof of ownership in lieu of driver, substitution of proof when further proof is required, cancellation or return and reestablishment, self-insurer, and proof of group financial responsibility. Those are just the headings of each of the statutes that's in that article that is referred to give flexibility to an owner of one of these, as far as they need to show that they have financial responsibility, but it can be in accordance with this section that already exists for other vehicles.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so if I have a four-wheeler and this statute goes into play, then I need an insurance card just like I do with my licensed vehicle.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Heather.
Representative Obermiller, yes.
And that would be in addition to that sticker. So I'd have a sticker and an insurance card. Off-road sticker and insurance card.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Obermiller, yes.
Thank you.
Senator Furphy, you have waited patiently. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Heather, under the mirrors, 315954. One of the issues that's come up is this reads, operated pursuant to 31.5.1601 shall be equipped with a mirror mounted on the left side of the vehicle. Now, the shop where I bought my side-by-side said, yeah, you've got to have a horn if you're going to drive it on the road and a mirror to see what's behind you. My mirror is mounted on my windshield. This is all enclosed vehicle with 4 seaters, and it's got a rear view mirror. I really don't want one on my left side because we go through some tight areas and I don't want to have to take the mirror off. I just wanted to clarify that. That works as long as you have a mirror that sees behind you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, I would need to consult the definition of off-road vehicles. I'm not entirely sure that a side-by-side fits in the definition. And so what I'd like to do, I don't want to do is speak off the cuff and say a flippant yes or no about the side-by-side and the mirror. But I want to go to 31-1-101, which has the definitions in it. And then I'm going to A15K. I don't know if anyone's following along, but just, so we're going to the definition section A, and then 15K. So I would like to read for all of you. It's kind of a lengthy definition, but what an off-road vehicle means. So we'll know if it gets a lawnmower in here as well. We'll see. Okay. So off-road recreational vehicle means, one, there's a sub paragraph, a recreational vehicle primarily designed for off-road use that is 50 inches or less in width, measuring from the outside of one tire rim to the outside of the opposite tire rim, and that has an unladed weight of 1,100 pounds or less. That's one subparagraph. Another I don't know if that would address your side-by-side. It seems like maybe 50 inches might be narrower than, I'm not sure. And two is any motorcycle not required by law to be licensed that has an unladen weight of 600 pounds or less is designed to be ridden off-road with the operator astride upon a seat or saddle and travels on 2 tires. So I don't think that would be your side-by-side. I'm not trying to interpret this at the same time. I'm just thinking if we're hearing the same thing, you know, your side-by-side, not me. And then there is subparagraph 3, which is any multi-wheeled motorized vehicle not required by law to be licensed and is designed for cross-country travel on or over land, sand, snow, ice, or other natural terrain, and which has an unladen weight of more than 900 pounds. So that could be. Perhaps. So now.
Heather, I don't want to tie up the committee's time. Maybe I can get with you later and we can define that, but I think the dealership would be interested in knowing that for sure. If they're selling these vehicles to be used on road. And I do have insurance. It's fully insured. I do have the horn, as I said, meets all the light requirements. And it's really designed for the winter with tracks to go through some tough areas. So I'll get with you and we can define it. I just really don't want to have a mirror on the side.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, the current law only addresses the subparagraph 2 definition, which was the two-wheeled vehicle that you sit astride. When I read there were three subparagraphs in the off-road vehicle definition. And so the current one addresses the kind of dirt bike definition. And so if this change is what would include all of the off-road vehicles. Or unless the committee said to have it only address maybe paragraphs or subparagraphs 1 and 2. That would be the committee's prerogative. I don't know, but I'm just saying that it's possible that as you were previously sold it, that they were going from existing, or no, not possible, but completely feasible. They were going from existing law, which says that this mirror needs to be on basically a dirt bike, not all of the definitions of the off-road vehicle.
So I don't know what exactly qualifies to be an off-road vehicle. I thought I knew and now I don't, but I would say that Senator Furphy, it seems to me like the first line on page 3, you make that and into an or, and I bet that takes care of the problem. So we'll work that when we get there, but just feels like we can just say wherever you put a mirror that you can see behind you, that'd be good. That's all we want, really. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, to answer a couple of those questions that came up, Representative Obermiller was asking what he needed to operate on a roadway. The lights, the horn, the insurance. One thing he forgot, he's got the sticker, but he needs a license plate also. So you need a lot of things
Yeah,
to operate
for
on.
that heads up. Yeah.
On a highway. The other thing about that left-hand mirror, my dealership put a mirror on that would swing away when you hit your whatever you're hitting. But they said it was required, and I have a rear view mirror also, but I had to have the fold-up mirror too at my dealership.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
I'm not
for you.
sure that I'm thinking that we need that, but anyway, go ahead, Representative.
Yeah, just to follow up on Senator Anderson's. What surprises me about this bill is that line on page 4 where it says proof of financial responsibility. So, I mean, what it implies is right now, you don't have to have that proof.
Interesting.
And so Senator Anderson was talking about the pieces of paper you need, like my side by side, I have it licensed. You got the off-road sticker. I think I have an insurance card for it. So what is this language adding that's not already
Mr. Chairman,
required?
Senator.
Mr. Chairman, the difference here is we're saying you can have proof of financial responsibility, not just liability insurance. Right now, you have to have liability insurance. This is saying if you have proof of financial responsibility, you don't have to have the liability insurance.
So committee, I think we're going to let Heather take a break. let's move on to some testimony from, the Department of Transportation. It's entirely possible that Taylor or the director might be able to answer a couple of these questions that we have. And we're going to continue to keep things moving this afternoon if we can. So these off-road vehicles go pretty fast, so I think we can keep it moving.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I'll start on behalf of YDOT and really just maybe remind everybody sort of how we got here and task and purpose of this bill. So as you recall, last session, we had a bill about allowing off-road vehicles to use a portion of the interstate. And we said, okay, yeah, we're okay with that. And if you do that, here's a couple things you need. And you need safety equipment insurance. And then that bill did not progress. But as we thought through that issue, working with state parks, where we've gone is this whole concept of taking roads and making them trails as defined by state parks and allowed by us. There are certain portions of state roads, small portions, that we have conceptually agreed to say we'll enroll them as a trail because there's no other way to go from trail to trail as defined by the county or the city. And so we've got sections of state highway now that will be trails as defined in statute and supported by state parks. So from the department perspective, my call was, listen, I don't want a vehicle on a state road that's defined as a trail that doesn't have safety equipment and insurance. And that's what this bill does for us. It sets the condition to say, hey, we got this nice set of trails that we're supporting for economic development across the state. And some small portions that's going to hit the state road. But it's only a matter of time till we have an accident and somebody is killed on these or causes an accident. And I see it very important that the safety equipment that's required is on it and that they have the appropriate insurance. Okay, so which really fits into the insurance statute. But that's what this bill does for us. Okay, it takes portions of the bill from last year, which is 20, and it moves it over safety equipment and insurance to this bill 19. Let me see what Mr. Rossetti would add, and then maybe.
Before we go to Taylor, I want you to think about this. What I always get concerned about on bills is that we have unintended consequences. We have at least 3 places in Wyoming where we allow golf carts to get to their boats. Is this going to throw that blanket over the top of those golf carts and force people to park them? So, Taylor, what do you think?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe this bill as drafted would impact that. I think as the director mentioned here, what we've got to remember here is really these vehicles are operating kind of in 3 environments. You've got a registered environment like a vehicle, which is, as you described, Representative Obermuller, where you've gone down and plated, you've gone through the checklist that it has that safety equipment, and you've been issued a vehicle registration. So you have that, and then you probably also have something similar to an auto policy for that vehicle. And then also you have the trail system as designated by state parks. And that is, as Mr. Tesoro mentioned, cities and counties are now enrolling their roads and considering them trails. So on those county and city roadways, those vehicles with the sticker are able to be operated on the roadway, whether they're plated or not. That's the way the statute reads currently. So that's, we're talking about that environment here. We're trying to figure out how to make the vehicles that are operating on roadways comparable. Then the third environment is the trail environment, and we're not concerned with that, and this bill is not actually addressing that at all. So think about those vehicles being on the roadway. The way that this bill is drafted and the equipment that's being added is to allow somebody like the colonel here to engage in a traffic stop potentially for a vehicle of this nature and know what equipment ought to be present and whether or not that vehicle can be in that location. So we're making the person can choose. They don't have to register this vehicle, but they will be able to operate it with a trail sticker on those enrolled trails. And those trails are going to be city and county roads. So that's what we're trying to do here. And as Luke mentioned, our comfort level was, let's try to make it so that the equipment for those vehicles is the same regardless. So if they're encountered in that environment, that equipment is the same. And then the other caveat of that was that insurance and financial responsibility piece, because as you mentioned, the way the statute is written right now, those that are only registered as a trail under the trail sticker do not have to have that insurance. But in order to be operated on the roadways, we would like that to be comparable to if it's registered as a vehicle. So I didn't have to have that in here on the registration piece, because as you go through the registration process, you're required to have the vehicle insured. But under this process with just a sticker, we had to mention that we would like to do the insurance. And actually, I believe that Mrs. Wilkinson has a very elegant way to clean up that language so that it actually makes sense and is basically just going to stipulate a requirement for liability insurance. So I think that will be more clear to everybody, so we don't have to go back and understand what financial responsibility means. But what we're trying to do is make anyone who's operating the side-by-side on a roadway, whether it's registered with a vehicle registration license plate through the county or through the trail system with Dave here, have that same equipment so that in law enforcement encounters, everybody knows what's going on. That's what this bill is trying to accomplish, so that we can actually help build out this interconnected system.
Representative Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me try to say what I think you said. If I have just a four-wheeler, it doesn't have a license plate on it, I have the off-road sticker, and I don't plan to ever be on these special designated roads, that's all I need for that piece of equipment. Is that true?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Obermueller, if you were strictly on off-road trails, you would be fine.
And follow up, Mr. Chairman. So in planning, so anyone planning their trip has to know if the designated trail is also a highway for the purpose of this bill. And then they would be in violation of that if they didn't have it insured. And was there one other aspect of that? The safety equipment.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Obermueller, you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll go to Representative Henderson in just a moment, but Taylor, just to clarify, when I brought up, the slow moving vehicle golf cart type thing, there's Rangers and other things that people use, but they are in proximity to boat docks, for example, and they do run on state roads for about that far, but they do. And anytime we ever tweak this, it just seems to cause a lot of heartburn with law enforcement or whatever. So I just want to think about that and hope we don't. I don't think we intend for that to throw a blanket over those, but we may have to put an exception clause in there or something. Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman. My question goes to what we talked about earlier in terms of unintended consequences potentially. So I bought a new ATV and the clerk asked me if I wanted to register it for right-of-way use. And I said, no, I've got a mirror and a horn, but I don't plan to use it except when I'm out hunting off-road. And I also have insurance. And the other reason was the sticker's $15 a year. And the plates are quite a bit more, in my case, about 100 and something. And so my question is, we already have a process for these vehicles of various types, off-road vehicles, to use the right-of-way. are we potentially setting up a situation where somebody already has registered it, has a license plate and so forth? And so then shifts over, instead of a license plate, why not just get a sticker and save a lot of money every year?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, I do believe that could occur. However, the statute for the off-road trail system allows those vehicles to be operated on the public roads if the entity that owns the roads allows those roads to be enrolled. The issue that we have with that is we sit here in the middle of this where we're going to be potentially a barrier to some of those things being successful. Our area of comfort for this was to ensure that whether you register it with a license plate or with a sticker or both, that the individual have insurance. That's all we're trying to accomplish here. I'm not trying to make fiscal decisions for each individual. And I do think that counties may have an opinion on the loss of potential revenue here. I'm simply just trying to work with the statutes that have already been passed and make sure that we can put this thing together so that this project has potential to be successful.
Well, take it away, State Parks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Dave Glenn, Deputy Director, Wyoming State Parks, Historic Sites and Trails. I would just like to add a little bit to that, Representative Henderson, my apologies. One of the things that counties and cities are trying to do, for the most part, they're not blanket approvals. They look at routes. How do they get to the grocery store? How do they get to the hotels? How do they get to the restaurants? So a lot of those counties and cities are saying, this road, and this road are enrolled, not citywide. So that's one reason that they kind of did that, is they kind of wanted to still have those registration dollars coming in for the vehicles. The other thing that other states don't allow, some other states, they don't allow OHVs to be plated, to have a license plate. So if you're trying to be a destination economic driver, say Evanston, to get those OHVs to stop there, if somebody's coming from another state, they have no way to be able to use those roads, even if they're legal, even if they have everything they need, because they don't have a license plate. And if the road isn't enrolled, they don't have the ability to buy the sticker and be able to do that. I hope that helps a little bit.
Follow up, Representative Henderson.
Just real quick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the clarification. My thought is the unintended consequence here is for those areas that are trying to do the right thing and connect these trails, right? And make the statutes aligned with what we're trying to do. We're interfering with and potentially dismantling a reasonable revenue source that goes through and checks all the things, the safety, the insurance and so forth, and brings in more revenue for those localities. And so I'm wondering if we're missing something here in terms of that designation of those roads. Because you know what? I had the opportunity a year ago because we goofed up on a statute. And if you went ahead and went in and registered it, you didn't have to register it again, but as long as you own that particular off-road vehicle. We fixed that. But from my view, I think the obvious is the safety measures make sense. The financial responsibility makes sense. But I'm thinking about the people that have to enforce it. They're going to go up. You're going to have all kinds of things. And so for the folks who come from outside of Wyoming, well, let's make it easy for them. It's no different than going into one of our parks or our campground, our park areas, right? They just pay them out, a modest amount, and they're in. So let's keep it easy. But how do we prevent the possibility of confusing people in a situation where they have gone that extra step and got a plate on it because they know they're going to be in and out off the road and on the right of way, right? And they have that all set up. How do we keep that from being disrupted?
Taylor, you want that one?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Glenn actually probably can better answer this, but I can say that what we're actually trying to do, I think, is simplify this. It just seems very, very complex as we're doing it. What I anticipate being able to do once something like this happens, if this were to pass, you'd be able to advertise us potentially as a destination, and you'd be able to make it known to everybody what is required to come out here, buy the trail sticker, and then go tool around the country. That's actually what we're trying to achieve here is to simplify that. I think it seems complicated because of how we got here. And I think we got here because we allowed the ORVs on the roads. Then we backed in and created this trail program that then pulled the roads in. We're really just trying to go back, I think, and correct everything and line everything back up. Operationally, though, I would definitely defer to Mr. Glenn and ask whether or not this is complicating it or making it more simple.
So Taylor, I'm sorry to be riding a slower horse this afternoon. Just to clarify, if somebody from Utah, for example, comes up to Wyoming now and wants to ride their vehicle, by adopting these statutes, we're not going to require that there be a license on that vehicle, are we? Because I totally get where Representative Henderson is. I think the idea is to let them get an off-road vehicle sticker and take off. And so what happens to the out-of-stater that doesn't have a license on their vehicle?
Mr. Chairman, you've got it dead on. What we're trying to do is allow that individual to come here, buy that sticker, and use these trails. That's
Okay.
what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay. Go ahead, Representative over here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but the part of it that I'm having trouble with is that person doesn't have to come and put a license on, but they have to present an insurance card. And they're not likely to have that.
That's good. That's good caution too. So Representative Baker, go ahead, and then I'll come back to the co-chairman here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is that, for these ORVs and these roads that we're enrolling as new trails, is there any sort of standard as far as signage? Because if we're gonna bring in these people and one portion of the road is a trail and this portion isn't, I'm just worried that we're gonna cause more confusion for out-of-staters and out-of-towners who are gonna think, okay, this road is listed, I can go the whole, I can go through the whole city of Evanston, and so is there any sort of standard that's being put in place as these counties are enrolling roads as trails as far as signage?
Dave?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker, we have not looked at signage. What we have been looking at doing and working with our GIS folks is creating detailed maps of what are considered trails and what are not. And one thing I want to clarify too is how we break it out is we break it out as routes versus trails. And when we talk trails, specifically for the state parks office, those are trails in the mountains where kids can get on an OHV and go have fun. They don't need a driver's license. They don't need insurance. They need the sticker. When we talk routes, those are a lot of the Forest Service and BLM roads that are enrolled. We do require that they have liability insurance for those routes already. We do require that they have those things. They're all in rule versus statute. That's one of the other reasons we wanted to partner with YDOT is let's make this a little bit clearer and put it right in statute as we move forward.
Representative Obermiller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to back up to what I said about making it difficult for out-of-staters coming here and needing an insurance card. Do other states require these vehicles to have insurance right now? Maybe that's not a barrier. Anybody want to address that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Obermiller, I believe some states do and some states don't. I think for the most part, if you're going to be using a vehicle on the road, they do require liability insurance. And a lot of those don't require that you show the card. You just say, by buying this sticker, I am telling you that I have liability insurance.
Mr. Chairman, but I'm referring to the non-licensed vehicle, the four-wheeler that's not licensed. Under this bill, we're saying you have to have insurance. Do other states require insurance for that level of vehicle?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Obermiller, I do not know that answer.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman first and then Senator Anderson.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up on Representative Obermuller's line of thought here. So is it the intent that when someone buys a sticker, and I think I understand the difference between roads and trails and routes and all of that, To me, they're all the same. You run till you get caught. No, that's a joke. But anyway, is it the intent that when someone shows up to purchase a sticker from out of state, and they have to do that already, that they either sign this affidavit or that they present proof of financial responsibility? Is that where we're going here with the out-of-state vehicles?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burkhart, yes, the answer is yes. And we've worked with YDOT on this. We've had those questions. And I don't know if we've come to a conclusion on that. I think we've leaned towards, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Rossetti, we've leaned towards signing an affidavit saying that you have proof of insurance.
Okay, and follow up on that one then. Mr.
Go ahead.
So if someone signs the affidavit, causes an accident, and then it's determined they did not have insurance, is there any legal repercussions? Is there any enforcement, any fines, anything like that in this?
We throw them in Fremont Lake, 200 yards out, make them swim to shore. It's
Okay.
44 degrees. No, I'm kidding.
Mr. Chairman,
Thought we better lighten it up here.
Sure. Yeah, it would, yeah. They would be in trouble. I mean, they would be subject to enforcement.
So, Mr. Chairman, so what would that enforcement be? And again, this is unintended consequences. We put a rule in place but have no way to enforce it. Then the rule becomes meaningless in the end.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, it would be operating a vehicle without an financial responsibility.
Okay.
Senator
I
Anderson.
just wanted to make sure that, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, two things. I noticed you said a kid could be riding that in the hills. I think you have to be 16 years old to ride our ATV. No?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Lannon, on enrolled trails, no.
Oh,
If they're enrolled routes, yes.
oh, okay. All right. And then to answer the question, if these other states require insurance, I know Utah, Colorado, Montana, South Dakota, and Idaho do. You have to show your insurance before you can buy your sticker. So I think most of them do. I don't know about North Dakota, but I do know about those states. And all you have to do is show your insurance card, and then you can buy your sticker.
Thank you for that, Senator. And gentlemen, I think you get the idea of why we're trying to drill down, because we've got to take this out on the chamber floor and answer these questions. And it is a little bit difficult. And so committee, are we done with these gentlemen? If we are, then what I want to do is go to some public comment on this.
Mr. Chairman, real quick,
Final comments? Yeah,
if you
go
let
ahead.
me have one more comment here,
We
sir.
reserve the right to bring you guys back up here too.
Well, you certainly can. You can certainly cut me off as well. I do believe we passed out a proposed amendment to this bill, and I hope you guys have that. I think it looks like a lot of wording. It's really not particularly major. Oh, it looks like Ms. Jarvis has it.
It's big, it looks bigger than the bill.
As she's passing that, I'll just give a little bit of background as to why we're bringing this forward. So as Mr. Tesoro mentioned, there's a good effort going on out there to identify connecting places and things and items in the southwest corner of this state. As you guys are aware, there's a thing called the interstate that runs through there. And if you guys recall on the tour today, we went down the south side of the interstate there, and then we took that little jog to the north end of the interstate. That intersection or that crossing underneath the interstate is still technically interstate right of way. As the laws are written right now, you are not to ride these vehicles in interstate rights of way. However, if you look at what we were on today and you look at the type of vehicle that's going to be out there and the way these vehicles are going to be operated in a location like that, it seemed sensible to the department to try to figure out a process by which we could allow that type of operation. Especially if Mr. Tesoro's group has identified a great bunch of riding on the south side, and then another group has identified a great bunch of riding on the north side. That's literally what's stopping the connection point, is that crossing there. So this amendment, as it's written, it pulls in a whole bunch of stuff, and it does this for a reason, because we're having to pull in an area that wasn't in the original bill, but I believe it fits. So we're pulling in the off-road recreation, which is 31.5.124. And if you flip it over to page 2, that's actually where we get into what the amendment is. And it's there on lines 12 and 13. And this says, unless authorized by the department pursuant to the provisions of 31.5.1601E. And 1601E I'll talk to here at the end, but I'm adding it to this section just so that we make sure it's in this section. Additionally, we're going on in 124 and adding that to paragraph C, which is there on page 3, lines 2 and 3. Again, unless authorized by the department pursuant to the provisions of Wyoming statute 31.5.1601A or E, sorry. Then as you move over to page 4, 5, and 6, you see we're in 1601, which is in this current bill. The meat of this amendment is right here on the back of page 6. And it's there on lines 11, 12, and 13. And this basically is off-road recreational vehicles shall not be operated on interstate highways, except in clearly marked crossings authorized by the department, rules and designated in consultation with the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. What this language would allow is an area like that crossing we went under today to be under consideration to make it clear and legal that you can absolutely cross that in an off-road vehicle. It's not blanket approving that across the board. It's making sure that that is still looked at. It's not allowing those vehicles in the interstate right of way as we were discussing last year. It's simply allowing those crossings after they're clearly marked and designated by the department. That would be my proposed amendment.
Questions? Okay. Thank you, David. Director?
Mr. Chairman, I think just my closing comment is really, I think what you see here is our effort to work with state parks and other entities around the state to support this, economic initiative while keeping our roads safe. Because I think there's certain expectations of vehicles that are on our roads. And this tries to bridge that gap and get to us a good place in terms of, yes, let's try and go down that road.
Gentlemen, thank you. Again, I reserve the right to ask you another question or two. We're going to go to some public comment on this bill. Ms. Wilkinson, please come forward. Comments on 0019.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Catherine Wilkinson, this time on behalf of American Property Casualty Insurance Association, here today in opposition to the bill. We do have an amendment that would make us neutral. I would just like to start out by saying with this bill, the way that it is linked to the motor vehicle financial responsibility, would just assume that insurance is attached. Those standards are used for vehicles that have motor crash rating. Sorry. So there are financial responsibilities that are designed for vehicles that you drive on the interstate that have standards, and that's where those rates of liability come from. There are several different ways that ATVs can be insured. Sometimes as an endorsement on a homeowner's policy, sometimes as other riders, sometimes they can have a separate policy. However, we are opposed to them linked to the motor vehicle financial responsibility laws as in this language. So I did have LSO pass out an amendment that I did run by the Department of Insurance and YDOT previous to today, which would just state that proof of liability insurance with limits that would be set by you, the minimum, as a policy decision, not necessarily linked to those financial responsibility laws. A typical amount for those liabilities is a minimum of 25,000. And provide that just for your information as it is policy decision where you would like to set the minimum. With that, if this amendment is adopted, then we would be neutral on the bill, but as it stands written, we are in opposition to it. I would stand for any questions.
Ms. Wilkinson, we've always been somewhat reluctant to put numbers in the statutes because day after tomorrow, they're outdated. Any thoughts as to whether or not we can figure out a way to word something like this without a limit? Or is it something we just have to revisit every 2 or 3 years and up the amount?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the latter of just revisiting, like I said, the typical amount, I mean, they can vary, but the typical minimum is $25,000, but definitely a policy decision for you all to make of how you would like to word that.
Questions? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not advocating for it, but do you know how many states require insurance on all off-road vehicles?
Mr. Chairman, I do not, but I can see if I can get back to you on that.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, 25,000 sounds kind of low. I'm kind of like the chairman. I'm kind of reluctant to put an amount on this. But that for sure ought to be the minimum because a RV costs that much and ATV costs more than that. So I sure wouldn't make it 25 if I was making it.
Mr. Chairman, the amounts are usually set at minimums for that reason. The higher you go, the less likely everyone will get insurance on a vehicle at all.
I guess, Catherine, the idea there is if you don't put a minimum, somebody will just get a $5,000 policy.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I mean, the whole idea of a policy is to cover anything, if there should be an accident to ensure that there is coverage for it, then you run into the uninsured issue or underinsured or not insured.
Further questions? Okay, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, not a question. I was just looking at what the current insurance statutes say. And they do specify dollar amounts with 25,000 being the minimum on a motor vehicle, your car, truck, whatever. So I don't think it's unreasonable to specify an amount. We already do it.
So I need to have a policy as big for the ATV as I do for my Dodge Ram truck.
And it's based on injury or death to a person. So, I mean, if you run over someone with a four-wheeler versus, pickup truck, they're dead both ways. I don't think it's one is more dead than the other.
Very good point. Okay, thank you, Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Further public testimony on 0019. Insurance and safety on off-road vehicles. Do we have anybody virtually out there? Any further public testimony? Okay, we're going to close public testimony. I'm going to allow real quickly, as we go, let's make sure if we've got a question of our panel, our previous panel, let's make sure and ask it, but I'd be interested in what your pleasure is on this bill.
Move the bill.
Okay, I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by the co-chairman. Let's work the bill. We do have a couple of amendments. Go page by page. I always try to go page by page. I'm just looking to make sure where we track those in if we choose to move them. I'm not sure on the whiteout amendment where that comes in, but we'll, anything on page 1, committee? Anything on page 1? Anything on page 2?
Mr. Chairman, Can I get a point of clarification?
Representative Burt, go ahead.
So looking at the YDOT amendment for the, I mean, it's labeled off-road vehicle safety insurance, and looking at the two bills that, I'm looking at the draft 0020 and of course 0019. I'm curious if the one where we're changing, where it allows clearly marked crossing authorization by department rules for the operation of vehicle, I'm wondering if that amendment would go better with the 0020 draft as an operational bill. When you look at the title, it's specifying requirements for operating off-road recreational vehicle near an interstate. Whereas 19, we're talking about safety equipment and insurance. I'm not sure that that particular amendment fits.
You know, that might be a good catch, Representative. I'm looking, where's Taylor? Am I missing him?
Standing in.
Oh, okay.
He's hiding in the building.
Taylor, I actually, does this really, I guess, belong in the insurance and safety bill, or does it belong in 20? The operation bill?
Mr. Chairman and to Representative Burt, to me, I think it's kind of a decision and a direction that you guys would like to go. My thinking in this was, we had the two things together last year. And at this point, this seems like it's a draft bill. It seemed like it could be an appropriate time to go ahead and get part of the operation piece as well as the safety and insurance piece together. I wouldn't fight you too hard on it either way. I do think that it is an important amendment to consider as we move forward to actually make what SWAT and those groups are trying to do be successful.
Thanks, Taylor. We'll take it up. So, yeah, go ahead, Senator Anderson.
Question for Taylor, Mr. Chairman, on your page 1 of on line 10, you're saying same equipment requirements under this act as an implement of husbandry. I understand that in ag terms, but I didn't understand that in ATV terms.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Anderson, this is, I think, part of some of those unintended consequences as you've rolled through this over the years. What that section basically does is it protects the agricultural uses and clearly delineates what they have to follow versus what these ORVs have to follow. So again, what's sitting here on page 1 is existing statutory language. Nothing there on that amendment is new.
Okay. Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a point of clarification for me, I like the language in your amendments. I have nothing against the language. Going through all the work that we're doing, though, I want to make sure that we're clear that we're not trying to put two issues on one bill. And if we're going to work the 0020 draft in November, I hate to see us putting something that wouldn't pass as possibly a second issue on a bill, get to the chambers and it getting pulled off and then us not actually getting it in there. Whereas if we could get attached to 00, where I think it looks like it should be better, we could work that in November. That was my only concern, is I still want to see it. I just want to make sure we have the better chance of get it implemented.
I think that's a good caution, Representative. Senator Pappas, you've got a question.
Yeah,
or
not a
comment.
question. I was just gonna agree with Representative Burt. I think it belongs at 20. And I would ask that staff just prepare an amendment, this amendment, to come in November when we deal with 20.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, do you mean amend 20 with this in it?
It's gonna have to be, because you'll have to add paragraph 124 in it, right?
No, Mr. Chairman, 124 is already in 20.
Okay.
And it's amended almost exactly like this. It
So,
refers to such and such.
You can bring it
E.
one of two ways, Heather. My preference would be that you fold this one into the consideration on 20.
Okay, so like maybe
Or you
put them
could-
two side by side.
make it one bill. Otherwise, bring it as an amendment either way. But I think it's been pointed out, and I agree, that I think this really belongs in 20 and not 19. So
Mr. Chairman, please excuse me, I wasn't clear. This information that is in this proposed amendment is virtually in
Correct.
20
Yes,
already. It's
yes,
already there. So what
yes,
I
it
can do
is.
for November is, I think I'm hearing you say is just maybe clarify where what is already in 20, it maybe if it differs from what Mr. Rossetti has proposed for, so that the committee can look at them side by side in November.
I don't know that I need to look at them side by side. I think that we can, if there's language that you don't have in a bill that you think this may help.
Okay.
Certainly. My suggestion, Heather, is that we go ahead and fold in what YDOT has suggested.
Okay.
And you're good at that. You can take that and modify the language a little bit if there's a spot that needs it. But primarily, we want to make sure that that gets in there. Right here. So anyway, hope that makes sense. Then we've got one bill to look at. Otherwise, we're glad to look at an amendment and we'll pull it in at that time. So. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it does. It's in the bill. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you. I think let's disregard that particular amendment then. We're on page 2. Anything on page 2? Page 3? Okay, we are on page 4. Representative Obermuller.
Mr. Chairman. Oh, are you on page 3? Oh, I'll defer, Representative Henderson has something on page 3.
Representative Henderson, you had something on page 3?
Yes,
You said?
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Let's go back to page 3.
Sorry, we had testimony regarding the designated areas of the towns that have passed ordinances for this purpose. And so line 7, where it says upon any public road, right away, I'd move to change any to read designated, upon designated public road, right away. Right.
Representative, can you clarify where you are?
Page 3, line 7.
Line 7, an off-road recreational vehicle may be operated?
No, mine says on line 7, upon any public road right of ways, rights of way. And I'm just, maybe I got a different copy. Okay, line 8, but basically where it says any, change that to read designated, upon designated, because there's various communities that have enacted ordinances. And those communities are going to have designated areas in their communities where they want this to take place. And so they can designate those areas.
Okay, Heather, you've got something on this.
If I get a second.
I'll second that.
Mr. Chairman, I know that everyone just filed away the copy of 1601 that came from Mr. Rossetti, but it would be helpful if y'all had that in front of you because that has the entirety of 1601 for you. And I think what you'll find is that subsection A of 1601 has 3 paragraphs, and paragraph 1 addresses these designated roads, and that is in this bill on the page 3 down at line 15. So it already has the, that paragraph has the designated. So I think that the concern of Representative Henderson is addressed in that first paragraph.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think so too.
Okay.
Good thought, Representative, but I think we are covered. I think we're good.
All right, just for time, I'll withdraw.
Thank you for that. So anything else on page 3?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Heather.
I had marked that I just don't want to miss it if I was supposed to call it to your attention. Was it the committee's desire to strike "and" on that first line and make it be "or"? I just didn't know if that was a note that the committee ultimately wanted me to revisit.
So thank you for that, Heather. That was my thought. And correct me if I'm right, committee. Why would that not work if we just, what we really want that vehicle to be able to do is to see behind them. And I thought Senator Furphy brought up a good point. Why do we have to put a mirror on the left side outside? I'm looking at the colonel. He's not jumping up and down, so maybe we're onto something here. Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's because the vehicle statutes require a mirror on the left side so that you can see in the mirror if someone's passing you or if there's someone behind you in the other lane and you wish to pass. There's a reason it's on the left side.
Let's
Colonel
leave it.
can clear that up.
Let's leave it for now, but I reserve the right in future months to come back to that.
Mr. Chairman, where do you want to put the "and"?
I wanted to change and to or.
And where is that?
First line on page 3.
Boy, mine's sure different than
Yeah, mine
yours.
is
I've
too.
got working draft 25,
So do I.
but that line is on page 2 on mine.
Yeah.
I must have.
You know, I've got to get off this computer because this 0.5 on the computer is one line off. There it is, right top, page 1, right there.
I'm on that, I'm on the computer too, and it's on page 2.
Wow, is that? Goofy is that?
Well, you don't have your PDF open, that's your problem.
I'm so located.
Download it.
Huh.
No, right in it.
Okay.
Now open that. Now go to page.
There it is, page 1 again. Sorry for the confusion. You guys were wasting a lot of time on this. Let's move on. We're not gonna do this at this time, but
That's fine.
my apologies. I do have the right draft up, but for some reason it's on it's one line off. Let's go to page 4. We do have the American Property Casualty Insurance amendment. Does somebody want to move that?
I'd like to move it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
I like the idea that
Senator Anderson,
they have that instead of financial responsibility.
did you want to put maybe a $25,000 figure on that?
I really like that $25,000 figure, Mr.
Yeah, I
Chairman.
thought that's what you
So
said.
That's at 25,000.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Representative Overmiller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, is this 25 is that consistent with other places? Is that what I've heard, that is consistent with other places in the statute?
I believe the co-chairman has researched that and indicated that that's the case.
Good deal.
Too low, but it is consistent.
Okay, anything else? All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, that amendment passes. We're back on the bill. Anything else on page 4? Okay. Heather, would you take roll on 0019, please? Yeah, question 2.
This is a roll call vote for 23 LSO 0019.5 off-road vehicles, safety insurance as amended. Senator Anderson.
Aye.
Senator Furphy. Senator McEwen. Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Representative Baker. Representative Burt. Representative Henderson. Representative McGuire.
Excuse me.
Representative Obermuller. Representative Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Romero Martinez.
Absent.
Representative Stivart.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Burkhart.
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
Aye.
That passes unanimously.
Okay, committee, thank you. Before we go back up to the statutory bills for our consideration this afternoon, a couple of things. We're gonna have a hard stop at 5 o'clock tonight. In the meantime, we've been joined by, I think, Senator Dockstader. I thought I saw him walk in. The president is here, and so we are on the topic of all of our off-road vehicles. Mr. President. You're welcome to come up and visit with us a little bit. What we're going to do with the bill specifically related to the operation of off-road vehicles, and the Southwest Trail's interest in that bill, we're going to carry that forward as we work the right-of-way issue. We're going to await a white paper and perhaps even a weigh in by the Attorney General on the rights of way. We think we're good. We're pretty sure we're good. We want to make sure of that, and then we'll take up the bill in November, but would value any testimony you'd like to give, Mr. President. I know you've sat in on several meetings in the Southwest on this issue, and it's got possibilities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be brief. You 5 o'clock hard stop. We'll honor that. I got held up on the way. Appreciate the good work of our transportation department. They found some paving, new paving up by Cokeville that didn't pass muster. And so they said, we're starting over, pull it up and start over. And I sat in a big long line of traffic while I did that. So you got a good transportation department. Yes, I have sat in with some meetings with Senator Schuler. I've had a lot of meetings in Southwest Wyoming here and in Evanston, and I've tracked them all and appreciate the work they're doing. Mr. Cesaro has already spoken to you. I find that his motives are pure because he doesn't drive one of these or own one or ride one, but he's just simply trying to improve the economy of the state and starting in his neck of the woods to get it done.
Mr. President, he might be the only one in the building that doesn't own one of these. I'm just checking. Yeah.
You just said one, admit to it.
There
but-
you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've got them too, but I noticed they're getting bigger and faster. They're traveling our highways this summer when we hit that $4 and $5 gas, and people were using those. Just lend my support to this work. Appreciate you making sure that it's done properly, running it through the AG's office and making sure that we get the whole process right, and look forward to hearing it in November. I just say that we are on the road to making sure that we're connecting our communities. We've reached out to some Southeast Idaho counties and have already connected through something called the Caribou Loop Trail, kind of a mixture of county roads and mountains. We're doing that. And then I'm sure you've been updated on what's happening here. And it's just a matter of making sure that we can come and go from our towns. People are using these. They're coming. They're spending money in our communities. They're not hesitating. We're trying to get things worked out a little better with our federal folks, our federal friends up at the National Monument up the road here a ways, Fossil Butte, so that we can come in from the back country there and just make use of what we have out here in Southwest Wyoming. Fully in support of this and the work, and I appreciate Mr. Chairman and this committee's work on working on this and moving it forward, but making sure that we're doing it right with the AG's office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. President, thank you. The goal is, and the target is the session. So plenty of time. We just want to make sure we do this right. I think it has a lot of merit and a lot of upside. And, we're excited to move this along, but not until we've got every I dotted and the T's crossed, and I think it's got great potential. So appreciate your work, and it's been a real eye opener and a lot of work been done over here that I've learned a lot. So appreciate that. Any questions of the president? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. President. Thanks for making the trip. We discussed this just briefly earlier about the integration of these roads into our trail system and the potential for signage and versus the technology mapping. Do you have a preference, or do you see future issues with enrolling some of these roads and them not being clearly marked?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker. Not really. There's a lot of things you can do. We've started, for example, with Historic Lander Trail up in Western Wyoming, so that you can pull out and use an app to connect it. We can do it with these too. We didn't get too fancy, folks, on our Caribou Loop Trail. We just use those kind of plexi posts that with an emblem on every mile or so that people could follow them. I haven't found any issues with that. People are finding their way around with that. I think we have to make sure that we cooperate with our local county officials on these.
Any other questions? Senator, thanks. Appreciate you coming down. It's good to see you. By the way, we came down through your country early in the summer, all the way down to Mr. Tesoro's hometown, because we had never been to the horse race track. And you came on down there too. We loved, if you haven't been over through Afton, Star Valley area in a while or ever, you really need to go over there and take a little drive because you come from a beautiful part of the world.
Mr. Chairman, you're always welcome. We ride our ATVs and our snowmobiles right out of our garage into the Bridger Teton. I'd take you on one of those rides.
Yeah, rub it in. Just rub it in. That's awesome. Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, committee, we're gonna maybe take a break. I think we're not gonna do a break. If you need to take a break, please do it. But let's keep moving so we can get to some of these.
Mr. Chairman, while we're moving on, could I just introduce somebody else from the crowd here?
Absolutely, Representative, go ahead.
Yeah, so you guys probably remember Joe Barbuto. He's a former House member and our current Sweetwater County Treasurer. So Joe's here. And then Tony Nemec, actually sitting by Stacy there. Tony just recently received the Republican nomination for House District 60, which is the seat that I currently represent. So barring any unforeseen circumstances, Mr. Nemec, the sheriff deputy, will be joining the body hopefully soon. So welcome, Tony. Thank you. And Joe, thanks for coming.
Representative Barbuto, good to see you and congratulations. Look forward to working with the representative going forward. If you get over, do you have a one more hurdle to clear in November? Okay, well, we'll be watching that closely. So thanks for coming. Let's go to the benefits for spouses of law enforcement members, Bill 0023. And Heather, if you could walk us through that one. You guys go ahead and stay up here because I think it would be appropriate for you to kind of give us a little introductory remark on this bill, Director, and then we'll have Heather walk us through the bill.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll tell you just the quick introductory remark here is, it's certainly we've been talking about employees, a lot, and specifically earlier today. This is actually an idea that came out of our what we call an employee advisory team. So we formed little teams and really to support dialogue between, whiteout leadership and boots on the ground. And this is an idea that floated up that says, hey, if I get killed while I'm on duty, after I hit 20 years, my wife actually gets less, my spouse gets less than if I was retired. And you start saying, man, that seems wrong. And so I'm not going to walk you through the bill, but I tell you, I certainly do see this as improving the quality of life for our troopers who are enrolled in this retirement plan. We did coordinate with Mr. Dave Swindell from retirement. He's golden with it, and I believe there's a rep on today from that agency. And so Mr. Chairman, I really certainly see this as a way to take care of some of WYDOT, in this case, our troopers that are part of this retirement plan.
Any questions,
Chairman?
Directors? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm kind of questioning why we would just do that for law enforcement members. Snowplow driver that gets killed on the road has the same problem that you're talking about for the spouse of the law enforcement member, I'm assuming, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Was that considered, Director?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, so that's a good question. Actually, our understanding is it's unique to this specific retirement plan.
Oh.
In fact, so I believe Mr. King's here from Game and Fish. They're also affected by this. So there's actually two different law enforcement retirement plans in the state. The other retirement plan, actually, this language would mirror that other retirement plan and bring this into that place. So different retirement plans and different entities out there. The other thing that's in this bill that I probably should just mention as we go down this road is this ability to rehire. Right now, it is basically prohibited for us to rehire a trooper after they've retired. And so in this day of trying to find employees and to bring people back to the workforce, it would be very helpful to amend the statute to allow us to rehire those that have previously retired. Let me maybe see if Colonel Ratliff has any other opening comments, and we'll let you walk through them.
Okay, Colonel, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Director, I believe he said it all. Really, it's pretty simple. It brings the Warden Patrol DCI program in line with the larger law enforcement program and offers the same benefits and as the director spoke, I think it's going to be a good thing that we're able to rehire folks. And certainly something that we need to look at in this time of not being able to hire anybody.
Any questions of Colonel Ratliff? Colonel, thank you. We may get back to, go ahead, Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's smart to see ways that we can expand our available population of potential people to work for us. What's the size of the rehire population in Wyoming that you see? I mean, I know you're interim, but maybe you could get that for us offline. You see what I'm saying is that we're looking at this in a number of areas. Later tomorrow, we're going to talk about the Guard, and there's a lot of vacancies all over the place. We keep bringing up snowplow drivers and so forth. So what's it look like out there? What's our landscape of potential population, if you know that?
And Mr.
Go ahead,
Chairman and Representative Henderson, I don't know the number. I don't know the number. A significant number of folks have moved on, have passed away, et cetera, et cetera. We would certainly have to make some phone calls.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. Heather, this,
Mr. Chairman.
oh, Senator Furphy, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I just need to understand this program. It's probably a simple answer, but so this increased benefit to the spouse, how long does that last? Till the spouse passes away? Is that what the?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Furphy, I believe that's true. I believe there is a representative from the retirement board who may more accurately be able to answer that question, but I think upon the spouse's death or the kids' death.
Senator, we'll get somebody on here in a minute during some testimony. This might be a good time, committee. Let's have Heather walk us through the bill, if you don't mind, Heather, and then we can have a good look at the bill, and then we'll move on to other testimony and some public testimony.
Mr. Chairman, I am talking from working draft 0.5 of 23 LSO-0023. This bill draft goes in and amends the law enforcement retirement plan and the state highway patrol game and fish and warden and criminal investigator retirement plans. And the language that you will see is to make it consistent across those two plans as far as deaths in the line of duty. And there's two different types of death in the line of duty while performing duties, and then death while you are in that job, and they're just slightly different. This, you weren't in the line of duty, but you did die while performing the job, and so what should the pension be then? So those are the paragraphs that we're going to see repeated as we go through, and look at the different sections here. So, starting on page 2, we are in the law enforcement officers plan, retirement plan. And what we're clarifying is that, so any officer, and we're with paragraph 1, starting on page 2, any officer who dies in the scope of employment shall receive a monthly death benefit payment that's equal to the greater of 62.5% of the officer's salary, or 2.5% of the officer's salary multiplied by the years of the officer's service credit as determined under a statute, the service credit that helps you determine what that officer's service is. Then, starting at line 19, an officer who dies outside of the scope of employment shall receive a monthly non-death duty benefit payment that is equal to 50% of the officer's salary. Then plus 6% of that salary for each child under the age of 18, not to exceed 100% of the officer's salary. So those two parameters that you've just seen, the 62.5% and the 50%, 62.5 if it's in the scope of death, scope of employment, and 50 if it's outside of the scope of employment, are what we've gone and pulled through for all of the statutes in this bill. And then there's one other scenario. Shall I stop?
Mr. Chairman,
Mhm.
Heather, how does the percentages conform to the vol fire plan?
I'm sorry, to which plan, Mr.
The
Chairman?
Volunteer Fireman's Plan?
Mr.
They have
Chairman,
a spousal death benefit in that plan. And what I'm looking at is, are we being consistent between the various plans?
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Burkhart, I need to look that up to find out. My focus here was on the law enforcement, the 2 different law enforcement plans.
Thank you.
And we'll certainly get back to you as far as how it complies with the fireman plan. And then I think, Mr. Chairman, I should also see how Snowplow, what their death is planned to be able to report back. Is that correct on those 2?
I think in the other plan, there is a death benefit, but I don't know that it is to this level, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, please continue. Thanks, Heather.
Okay, the third paragraph is for this, and this again was just to achieve consistency between the 2 plans, but this is talking about a person who retired, also is retired under this law enforcement plan, shall receive 2/3 of the pension of the law enforcement officer was receiving at the time of the officer's death, plus 6% of the officer's salary for each child under 18. So this particular one in paragraph 3 was a conforming amendment to make it equal to the other plan. Okay, there is a subsection that is added starting on line 14 of page 3. It's a new subsection P to where we describe how salary is calculated or decided, because if you recall back on page 2, the death benefit is 62.5% of the officer's salary. So subsection P says, as used in that section, the officer's salary for purposes of determining death benefit payments shall be equal to, and here are the 2 choices, the greater of these 2 things, either the officer's highest average salary at the time of death, as defined in subsection E of this section. Subsection E has a definition for that highest average salary, or the officer's final actual salary at the time of death as defined at another definition. And I would be happy to read what those definitions are, but this is just so that there is a standard way of determining what the salary is for purposes of that 62.5 or 50%. Now, at the beginning of page 4, there is a staff comment for the committee's information of who is covered under the law enforcement pension plan. That includes county sheriffs, deputy county sheriffs, municipal police officers, investigators of the Wyoming Livestock Board meeting specifications under, this is a definition of peace officer, that statute that's listed there. Investigators employed by the Wyoming State Board of Outfitters and professional guides meeting specifications under Again, that's another section of a peace officer's definition. Correctional officers, probation and patrol agents employed by the Wyoming Department of Corrections, Wyoming Law Enforcement Academy instructors, University of Wyoming campus police officers, and dispatchers or detention officers for law enforcement agencies. Those are the participants, or excuse me, usually the term is used, members of the law enforcement pension plan.
Heather, I thought that maybe one of the colleges, maybe a couple of them now have sworn peace officers on board. Would this provision cover them? But I could stand to be corrected also. I thought that Laramie County, for example, now had sworn police officers, and I thought that Gillette did.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe Laramie County does.
Okay.
We are on their campus, our WHP Academy.
I may stand corrected on that. I thought that at least one of the colleges had stepped up and put sworn police officers on their campus, but maybe not, and I just don't want to miss them, you know, if that's the case. So maybe we could take a look at that.
Mr. Chairman, I think if they're accredited law enforcement officers, that the large plan would cover them.
Okay, I think so. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Colonel. Appreciate it. Okay, Heather, please continue.
Mr. Chairman, and I will double check that as well. Okay, now, at the bottom of page 4, we are still in the law enforcement officer plan. This describes the situation of if a member of the retirement program dies as a result of any activity related to official duties as an employee before retirement under this article, then they shall receive a monthly death benefit. And I need to.
Mr. Chairman.
6. Oh. Sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So I'm in total support of the bill, bringing this in line with the other plan. My question relates to the duty related and the definition related to that. I know that there has been, I guess, county agencies that have moved to classify suicide as duty related. Do you know if this plan, does it classify suicide as a duty related death benefit?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Representative Baker, I do not know that, but I can look into that, or it may be if we do have someone from the retirement plan on who may be able to comment to that, but either way, somehow we can get the answer to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather.
Okay, so this 9-3-613, this is the other plan. This is the Warden Patrol and DCI plan. And you'll see that if someone dies as a result of duty-related employment, you'll see the inserted language, well, the stricken and inserted language starting on page 4 between lines 23 and 28, that we're inserting language to have it be that it's equal to the greater of 62.5% or the 2.5% of the member's salary multiplied by the member's service credit. So this is just making it be the mirror language to the other plan that was 2 pages ago. And then I'm pausing. No? Oh, okay. I thought you had a question, Mr. Chairman. And then at the top of page 5, subsection B, this is for the situation where a person, sorry, subsection B, this is the additional 6%. This is just organized slightly different. And so if someone dies in the line of duty, and then this is the additional 6% of benefits that are paid for the children under 18 years of age, up to not to exceed 100% of the employee's salary. So this is making the benefits the same as the previous. And then you'll see in subsection, an inserted subsection C, that way of calculating the member's salary, and that's on page 5, beginning at page 11, that the salary for purposes of determining the death benefit payments under this section shall be the greater of the highest average salary or the final actual salary, depending on, based on those definitions. And the information to the committee here is that the Warden, Patrol, and DCI plan our members that are covered under this plan they must be a sworn law enforcement officer, a sworn peace officer, or criminal investigator with the Wyoming State Highway Patrol, Wyoming Game and Fish, or Wyoming Attorney General's Office Division of Criminal Investigation, or must be an officer designated and appointed to the Capitol Police. Without looking into it deeper, that may answer the question about the community college person, because under this plan, if they're a sworn peace officer, they would be covered. But I do want to double check that closer, but it seems like that might cover them here, Mr. Chairman.
The co-chairman did look that up and under sworn peace officers, whatever, they're under the definition, college,
Okay.
campus security is covered.
A college or university. It
Yeah.
says, or, so, and it does say college, and I would take that to mean the community colleges. That's the only colleges we have in Wyoming.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if they choose to enroll in this plan, then they would be covered. Now, on page 6, this is still in the warden DCI plan that we were just talking, warden patrol and DCI plan. This is, it's just a different section, but it's for a member who dies before retirement and the member's death is not related to their official duties. And so this is where you'll see the 50% and still the 6% to children up to age 18, not to exceed 100% of the salary. So that same language, I'm not trying to gloss over it, but it's the same to make it between the plans. And then there is a subsection C on page 7. And this is for the retired member who's already who's already retired, and that's making it be 2/3 like with the other plan, 2/3 and 6%, just to make them equal. And then for this section, we needed to also add the information at the bottom of page 7 about a member's salary for purposes of determining the death benefit payments means that greater of the two salaries. So now we're on page 8. Page 8, the insertion at 9-3-615 is a conforming amendment because of a slight renumbering from B to C. That's why it's inserted there on line 7. And then in section 2 on line 8, Mr. Chairman, the Director Reiner, he indicated that this bill addressed rehiring, and it does not actually address rehiring, but just as a placeholder, I believe it would go here on page 8 after line 11 would be the insertion, which I would be happy to read about rehiring, or we can have the director or someone from retirement tell this proposed amendment about rehiring if the committee was interested in hearing it. This is where it would go. So that's why I'm bringing it up here. Would you
Thank you.
like me to mention it or?
Absolutely, Heather.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about what that amendment would be, and I would think that we'd want to consider it.
Okay. And I don't think we have copies of this, so I'm going to just read it from the beginning. It would go after line 11. And I would also request the committee's indulgence to make sure it doesn't go elsewhere, that we would need to also insert it somewhere else. Just given the two different retirement plans, it might need to go both places. But here at 9-3-616, there is a new or an existing section of law that talks about applicability of portions of Wyoming Retirement Act. And the amendment, it looks like it says requirements for eligibility for disability retirement under this article, either related or not related to office duties as an employee, shall be in accordance with the disability provisions of the Wyoming Retirement Act. That's existing law. And then this amendment would insert and a new subsection that say rehiring a retired member under this article shall be in accordance with the provisions outlined in the Wyoming Retirement Act at 9-3-415 G through H. So, Mr. Chairman, I would only be saying that this would be one location for this, but certainly would need to go through and vet and make sure that there aren't additional sections. But that's where the rehiring idea of someone of a retired member, and then would want a consistent between the two, which is what this bill does, which make it consistent between the two
Heather, the,
members.
the title of the bill is Benefits for Spouses of Law Enforcement Members.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Are we running off into the borrow pit by putting an amendment like that in the bill? I like the amendment. I'm just concerned.
Mr. Chairman, and that is one of the dangers of looking and saying something that I've only, just seen and not considered deeply, because what you're describing, I think, is true, because this would be someone who had this whole bill focuses on the benefits when the member has died, and I don't think it would necessarily apply here. So while it's similar sections and it does address someone who has passed away, yes, thank you, it would not
I don't
seem
think
to
it's germane
belong in this bill.
unless we were to amend page 1. And the title of the bill, we could potentially do that, I would think, Heather, but maybe you can give some thought to that. That's my only caution. I sense that there's good support for this, but I'm concerned that it might run into some difficulty,
Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to give that additional thought if you wish, but I do think that your instinct is correct, and that it may be its own bill draft. And it would be quite perhaps a simple bill draft. I mean, although it might be both retirement programs in that bill.
So committee, my knee-jerk reaction would be, even though we've got a lot of bills coming, to probably have that happen, to just give it its own bill. But Senator Pappas, you've had something, and then we'll go to the co-chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It would just be my thoughts as well, that have a separate bill. It would be a very short bill, but that way, if someone had a hang up with either concept, they both wouldn't go down in flames.
Yeah, I don't want to jeopardize either one of them, that's well put, Senator, yeah. So, Mr. Co-Chairman, go ahead.
Thank you. So just on that discussion, the whole issue of rehiring of peace officers, law enforcement personnel is an issue that needs to be addressed due to the way our retirement system works. In effect, if they retire, they really can't go to work for another law enforcement agency. A highway patrolman could not go to work for, say, a small community that wants a relief peace officer at some point. That portion of our retirement laws needs to be changed. And I agree with you. I think we ought to handle that separately. So, and that's just information for the committee. Representative Henderson is the House's liaison to the retirement and can fill us in on that later. But I have a question for staff, Heather, and we talk about law enforcement in this. The one retirement plan is entitled law enforcement. But generally in our statutes, we don't use the term often law enforcement in describing people that are in that profession. The general term we use in statutes is peace officer. Now, throughout this, we use law enforcement, we use officer. Do we need to conform to any of that language? Although the retirement is the law enforcement retirement plan. It's specified in that manner. But do we need to make sure we're consistent with the terminology?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Burkhart, the retirement statutes specify very clearly to whom they apply. And while you are correct that typically in statute, or often in statute, we refer to peace officers, they are referred to in different situations. I think in this situation, because of the definitions and the specifications of to whom they apply, the two plans apply, it is possible that if you wanted to change it, it could create more confusion given the two plans, which are each very specific as to whom can participate and apply. So I don't think that there currently is a problem. And then this bill draft goes in, and if it called them officers, it calls them officers. If it called them members, it calls them members. And it doesn't affect who can enroll in the plan. It's
So-
the benefits.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Go
So,
ahead.
and that's a good explanation, Heather. I just want to make sure we don't confuse the systems. So if we're consistent with what already exists, that's fine with me.
Okay, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Heather.
the final part of this bill is on the bottom of page 8. And this is an applicability section. Just to specify that this doesn't go backwards, all these changes, that this act shall apply to the distribution of all benefits for the death of law enforcement members subject to this act made on or after July 1st of 2023. So it doesn't go backwards. And subsection B clarifies also that nothing in this act shall be construed to modify or impair existing contracts, benefits, or other obligations arising or awarded before July 1st, 2023.
Okay, any questions of Heather on the bill? Anything on the bill? Okay, I would like to go to some testimony and Heather, my understanding is we do have somebody from the retirement office here with us this afternoon virtually. If you could let them in, that would be terrific. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. If you could hear us, turn on your volume and we'd love to hear from you regarding this particular bill. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
We need to turn the volume up as high as you can for us.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Perfect. That sounds great.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chairman, my name is Ben Brandis. I'm the General Counsel of the Wyoming Retirement System. Appearing today on behalf of Director Swindell, who was unable to attend but sends his regards. I have been listening to the discussion on the bill presentation, and I'm happy to address a few of the questions that have come up, if that's all right with you, and then I can answer any other questions that you or the committee members may have. First of all,
that sounds great, by the way. Thank you.
Okay, good. I'll just kind of take them in order. I believe Senator Furphy asked a question about the benefit and how long it applies. I can just confirm that, once a spousal death benefit is payable, it is payable for the life of the spouse. That was one question that came up. Representative or Co-Chairman Burkhart raised a question about the volunteer fire plan on the death benefit, and I guess it's a good opportunity to confirm that the Wyoming Retirement System administers several different pension plans, most of which are paid pension plans for public employees. We do also administer a volunteer plan that applies to volunteer firefighters, EMT personnel, and volunteer search and rescue personnel. That's somewhat of a different plan. It does have a death benefit, but the death benefit in that plan isn't exactly applicable to our other paid plans. So we can get you information about what that death benefit is, but I'm not entirely sure that it's applicable to this discussion. And again, given the fact that we administer several different plans, the two plans that we're talking about here are the law enforcement pension plan and the Warden and Patrol and DCI pension plan. Those are two separate plans for two different groups of members of participating employees. Heather did a good job of describing the definitions, and those definitions are contained in the bill, but they are two separate plans. And the goal of my understanding, or our understanding of this potential legislation, is to equate the two pre-retirement death benefits in those plans. And then the further conversation about whether or not rehired retiree provisions ought to be applicable to the Warden and Patrol plan as they currently are in the law enforcement plan. The question about community college police officers came up, and I'll remind the committee, there was legislation passed in 2019 that included community college police officers in the definition of law enforcement officer, those employees that are eligible to participate in the law enforcement pension plan. So community college police officers are now, as of 2019, and the passage of that legislation included in the law enforcement plan. There was, I think it was Representative Baker asked a question regarding the definition of duty connected and whether suicide was considered to be a part of that. There is a statutory definition of duty connected. And I can read that. It's applicable actually to both of the different pension plans that we're talking about, but the definition of duty connected is an illness, injury, or disability from an injury or disease, which results primarily from a specific act or occurrence determinable by a definite time and place, from a physical or mental trauma, which arises from the nature and in the course of a person's law enforcement employment. And historically, suicide has not been captured in that definition of duty connectedness. There is some federal reference to federal law reference to the term duty connected, as well as some regulatory rule language that applies to this. But given the language connecting directly the injury or illness to activity that arises from the nature and in the course of a law enforcement employment, so far that definition is not extended to suicide. I will say with regard to the pre-retirement death benefit language in the bill that's been presented, the retirement system has reviewed it. It does have, it is a benefit increase, although it's a very slight benefit increase and really is negligible with regard to the funding of the plan, and the retirement system does not see any actuarial impact on this plan for implementing the pre-retirement death benefits as proposed. And similarly with the rehired retiree provision, we have submitted, as well as Lieutenant Colonel Ratliff, I believe, has submitted some language. We think that if the committee and the legislature were inclined to extend the rehired retiree provisions to the warden and patrol plan, that could be, and Heather's right, obviously LSO will go back and determine everything that would need to be amended in statute, but it seems to us that could be linked from the warden and patrol plan to the Wyoming Retirement Act itself, which contains the language of the rehired retiree statutes. And WRS has taken a look at that as well and determined that it also has a neutral impact on the funding ratio and valuation of the warden and patrol plan. There may have been another question or two in there, Mr. Chairman, but I'll turn it back to you to ask any questions that you or the committee may have that I hopefully can answer.
Mr. Brenda, thank you for being here this afternoon. It's very helpful. And committee, any questions or follow-up? Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ben, for your help there. My question is really a point of clarification. I mean, I'm thinking about school resource officers and wanting to know if they're covered as well.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, in Wyoming, my understanding is that school resource officers are almost uniformly members of police departments, local police departments. I'm not entirely sure that there are schools or school districts that are employing independent employees that are considered to be school resource officers that are not connected with local law enforcement. And so to the extent we do have school resource officers in any of our schools or school districts, my understanding is that they would be police officers almost always that would, by virtue of their employment with those employers be eligible for participation in the law enforcement pension plan.
Okay, further questions? Anything else, committee? Mr. Brandon, thanks again. Really appreciate it. If you stay on a little while longer and we have a question, we'll sure fire one off at you. Appreciate
Thank you,
that.
Mr.
Okay, thank you. Any, let's go to public comment on this bill. And once again, we are on 0023 benefits for spouses of law enforcement members. Is there any public testimony this afternoon here in the room? Is there anybody on virtually, Heather? Okay, once again, anybody want to testify on benefits for spouses? Please come forward. Absolutely.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chair, members of the committee. My name is Rick King. I'm Chief Game Warden for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department and Chief of our Wildlife Division. I appreciate the opportunity to come and visit with you this afternoon, and I'll make my comments very, very brief. I just simply wanted to highlight the benefits that this legislation could provide our individual officers and the department as well. As you've heard, it's very difficult to recruit well-qualified candidates into the law enforcement profession these days, and you've heard the challenges that the patrol has, and remarkably, surprisingly to me, I didn't think I'd see this in my career, but we are within the Wyoming Game and Fish Department having those same challenges of recruiting well-qualified candidates into our law enforcement profession. So for those individuals who are willing to serve in a law enforcement capacity, a change like this can certainly bring some peace of mind that their service, if it did result in a line of duty death, their spouse and family would be taken care of. So I think that from the department's perspective, this would provide a significant opportunity for us to include that component for recruiting possible candidates into our profession, and as well as retaining those great officers that we currently have. So appreciate the work on this, and I'd stand for any questions if you have any.
Rick, thank you. Boy, I sure don't disagree. It's a little bit awkward because that falls outside of our lane. And, you know, in our legislative work, we try to stay in our lanes as best we can. But sure belongs here. Ironically, I go to TRW next week, and I was sitting here thinking that I wanted to inform them of this bill. It feels like we could either tag that on then or later, or I'm kind of looking at Heather. Please make a note that issue is there, and that we may want to approach leadership or management council, that there are others that probably should be contained in the bill.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just a little bit confused. I believe that they are contained in the bill. Or do you mean we should?
Does it cover our game wardens?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. And the staff comment on after each of the plans. And so there's a staff comment on page 4 and another staff comment on page 5. Each of those staff comments tells the list of people who are members of each of those plans, of these two plans.
So we're covered?
Yes, Mr.
It's late in the
Chairman.
day. I apologize. I'm thrilled that it does, and Rick, I apologize.
And Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman, it's the second plan, the one that is on page 5, or well, begins a little bit before that, but it's the Warden Patrol and DCI plan that
Gotcha.
addresses the Wyoming Game and Fish, I believe.
Okay, good deal. Thank you. I will inform others on the other committee, but yeah, I apologize for overlooking that.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A clarification, though. It's those wardens who are in a warden status that are deputized as wardens, so that does not apply to someone in the office. Probably would not apply to Mr. King unless he kept his designation as a peace officer. Sorry to say. I don't know if you did or not, but there's a distinction there. The employees in the office, in effect, come in under the big retirement plan for all the state employees. It's not that they don't have one. This is very specific to those in those peace officer, law enforcement categories,
Well,
especially in game and fish.
yeah, thanks, Mr. Co-Chairman, and thank you, Rick, for prompting the discussion that I think it would be good for us to reach out to the other committee and to those affected, by this bill beyond transportation and military affairs. So thank you. Any questions for Rick this afternoon? Anything else? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Committee, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Any further public comment? Okay, we're going to close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill? Okay, who moved? Okay, Stivar and second by O'Hearn. Discussion? Okay, let's work the bill. Committee, anything on page 1? Anything on page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Where we cover the game wardens. Page 6? Page 7? Page 8?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would propose an amendment on line 17 and line 21, and then over on page 9 on line 1 to change the date to immediately upon all action necessary to make it an act, to make it effective immediately.
Who seconded? Thank you, Representative
So,
Henderson. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, my thoughts are, I really don't want to see any of this ever implemented for a spouse. I don't want the state to have to do this for a spouse of an officer, game warden, or anyone else. But that's the world we live in where it may be possible. And I guess I just can't see waiting until July 1st. I would hope nothing such as this happens before then. But that's my logic. I don't see any harm in doing it immediately, just to put this in place as soon as possible.
I agree. Any discussion? Oh, Heather, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder about this amendment as far as, would it be possible on page 9, line 1, to have this act is effective and then all of that immediately language, but then on page 8, line 17 and line 21, to have it say made on or after the effective date of this act?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's an appropriate change.
I think that's what the co-chairman was.
That's what I was
suggesting.
getting at.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pappas, did you have something?
I wondered if it affected any appropriation that we might have to do. It's usually our July 1.
I don't
think so with the retirement plan, but yeah.
Go ahead, Mr.
Just a
Co-Chairman.
question.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think if it has any sort of effect on, I don't think there's any on appropriation. There may be some small impact in employer or employee contribution. I don't think this is a big deal. They do it actuarially. I don't see much of a financial impact to the agencies or to employees at all.
And I think
Directly.
Mr. Brandon also indicated today that very thing, that there was negligible impact on the actuarial soundness of these plans. So, okay. Anything else? Question on the amendment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. That amendment has passed. We're back on the bill. Anything else? Committee? Okay, roll call on the bill. Question on the bill. Thank you, Heather, if you'd call roll.
This is a roll call vote for 23 LSO 23.5 benefits for spouses of law enforcement members as amended. Senator Anderson. Senator Furphy. Senator McEwen. Senator Pappas. Representative Baker. Representative Burt. Representative Henderson. Representative McGuire.
Excuse.
Representative Obermueller. Representative O'Hearn. Representative Romero Martinez.
Absent.
Representative Stibar. Co-chairman Burkhart.
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
Aye.
That passed.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee will keep going until we can't. So let's go to 23 LSO 0014, state employee moving expenses. This is an old friend. So I would think that that we're well aware of what the bill does, but Heather, maybe you could give us a quick overview to remind us of a bill that moved quite a ways through the process last year. So.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we're looking at 23 LSO 0014 version, working draft 0.5. And this is the new improved version from what you've seen before. By that, I mean, it's a little bit easier to understand and worded a little bit better,
Well, thank you for
in
that.
my humble opinion.
Yeah, thanks for your work on that. That's great.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we're starting, so what this bill draft does is it authorizes payment of moving expenses for state officers and employees. And it amends the rulemaking authority for the Department of Administration and Operations. So going to page 2, this bill draft, it goes into, 9-3-104, an existing statute which already addresses moving expenses. And what it does is it splits it into 2 instances, one in which an employing agency shall pay moving expenses, and one in which an employing agency may pay moving expenses. You know, for example, if it helps facilitate or recruit someone to a position. So that's the overview. The specifics are that in subsection A, it goes to say that when any state officer or employee is transferred from one state position to another within the state of Wyoming for permanent duty, or when a person is recruited for permanent duty within the state of Wyoming, because there was the question as it went through different reviews of what about new people who are being recruited? And that was part of the idea of the may section of this, new recruits. Then the employing agency shall, and this is on line 8, and this is some of the unchanged language, shall pay the actual expenses of transporting the household goods and effects of the officer or employee for a transfer of employment when the transfer is made as a requirement of employment and for the benefit of the state of Wyoming. That is not a new policy. That language came from above in the subsection A, more or less, as far as the stricken language of in the section above. The new paragraph, as far as the may, hey, suddenly we're being recorded.
You are being recorded.
I think we were before that too. In paragraph 2, the employing agency may pay an amount at the discretion of the administrative head of the employing agency not to exceed the amount allowed by Department of Administration and Information rules for the actual expenses or portion of the actual expenses of transporting the household goods and effects of a person for a transfer of employment or new hire resulting from the employing agency's recruitment of that person for the position. So that this makes the distinction between when they shall, if the agency is saying you have to do this or else, then they need to pay the moving expenses, and that was existing in statute, to adding them the discretion, but not to exceed certain rules, so there can be consistencies among agencies, consistent to follow the rules that as promulgated by the agency or the Department of Administration and Information. Now then, on page 3, there is a staff comment of the staff comment basically has the harder to understand language in case the committee wanted an exact replica of last year's bill. And so that's what that staff comment is, just letting you know that this language below would not include new hires. And then it also has that kind of the previous, a little bit harder to understand language.
Thanks for the reminder of that, Heather, and I agree with you. The language in the current bill is better. You did well. Thank you.
Right. Mr. Chairman, thank you. And it's a group effort. We go through different levels of review and we all work together. Section 2, section 2, which starts at the bottom of page 3, is it goes into 9-2-3207, that statute. And this is the authority for the Department of Administration and Information to promulgate rules. And if you look at the top of page 4, then that the Human Resources Division of ANI can promulgate reasonable rules. And just to be clear, under the subparagraph C concerning recruiting, transfers, and then what's inserted is moving expenses, discipline, grievances, and appeals. So it just makes it clear that they can draft the rules that are required for this. And then section 3 is stating that the Department of Administration and Information shall promulgate rules under 9-2-37 or 3207 necessary to implement this act. And the staff comment in this situation discusses the differences between or sort of the authority between policies and rules. And this 9-2-3207, which came from last year's bill, it talks about authority to promulgate rules. There's nothing in that section about drafting policies. And so to be consistent with what the actual authority is that the ANI is given in that statute, we went back to the word rule. And then section 4, that is just a split effective date to say that the agency should promulgate the rules and then this will be effective.
Okay, Heather, thank you. Questions of Heather? Representative Seibhauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around this. So, the highway patrol transfers trooper from point A to point B, his moving expenses are paid. If, say, employee A from the Department of Health applies for a job in Cheyenne, they're going to get their moving expenses paid?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, I don't know that in that situation, if it was at the discretion of the department head and that did not exceed the rules across that apply to to all of the agencies, the ANI rules, then it may be that a portion of those expenses may be paid or maybe not. That I don't think in the situation that you described where someone applies for a new job, they're not recruited, they're not told, hey, you need to do this because your job's ending otherwise or something like that. If it's not a mandatory move, there's no requirement for moving expenses to be paid.
Okay. Follow up? Okay. Senator Pappas.
No, I was just gonna, under your scenario, if the person applied for it, it would not be covered because the department didn't request the change. Under your scenario.
Or if that person, and I'll go to Senator McCune in a minute, but if that person negotiated that with the hiring agency to say, I applied for this and you're wanting to hire me, but I can't come unless you can help me get there, then I think this bill would allow some discretion as I read it. Senator McCune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's exactly how I read it. Shall. Well, that means they could do any of it or none of it. And I'm not sure we want to go down that path totally. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So Senator, line 14 on page 2, I think it begins may paying amount at the discretion of the administrative head. So if I'm the administrative head of something, I may do it, I may not.
Mr. Chairman, the shall is an existing language. So the current statutes are, the current statutes say that if there's one of these mandatory moves, they shall be paid. The main effect of this bill is to just add the discretionary part.
Does that help? Okay. Further questions of Heather? And I'll quit using lines, you guys, because all that does is confuse everybody. This little computer is not the same as that one. Anyway, thank you, Heather. I want to go to the agencies. So Department of Transportation.
Mr. Chairman, one question before.
Oh, Senator
she
Anderson
leaves.
came up with a late question to bring you back
Late
to the
question,
table
yes.
over there. Yeah.
Yes, a scenario where a Secretary of State employee wanted to transfer, say, to Casper, and it was purely their request, they would not get their moving expenses paid?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, unless an employee is, they may, it's at the discretion of the agency head. In a scenario, where it is not a mandatory move, then it's at the discretion. And not just the employee agency head, also definitely adhering to the A&I rules for what can and cannot be allowed.
Help. Okay, thank you, Heather. Director Reiner? Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think I'll be joined by Mr. Rossetti. So thank you, Ms. Jarvis, Heather. I agree. I like the language this time around. Mr. Chairman, you're right. This is an old friend. This remains very important to me and to the agency. As we go out and we talk with our employees, this comes up early and often in this whole retention issue that we have. So that's one reason. As you have tasked me with leading our state's largest agency, there's a couple things that you think about in our employees and taking care of them, and part of what, and it's all good for the state, and so part of training engineers and or troopers and some of these jobs that are across the state is you really need to get them into positions of increasing responsibility to train them. I'm pretty interested in training 2 or 3 chief engineers from now, and that happens by moving them to positions where they learn and grow, and that doesn't always happen in the same time. So individual career development is one reason to move people. The second reason that we move people is to get people into the right job, right? Because of their skill set. And what we know today is that we have really good jobs around the state that the right individual is not applying for because we will not assist with moving expenses. And it's having a debilitating effect on the organization in terms of getting skill set into the right position. And the long-term effect means we are not training employees and developing the way we should. All right, as you work people up through the chairs of increasing responsibility. So, you might say, man, how did we get here? And this whole concept between the shall and the may that's been asked about is the language in the shall, which is an existing language, really says that, hey, you'll pay it if it's for the requirement of employment or for the benefit of the state of Wyoming. I was unsuccessful in making the argument that if I take engineer A and move him from being, a resident engineer in pick a site, Buffalo, to make him the district engineer in Gillette, that was the good for the state of Wyoming. Because the current the current way that we select individuals is we post a job and individuals apply, we select somebody, and then off they go. That has been deemed good for the individual, not good for the state of Wyoming, and thus does not fall into the shall portion of this language, which is how we then got over these years to the may. And saying, listen, it's really important that we allow this individual to move, and that we assist with their moving expenses. And it's been an effect of really our pay. And today what you see is, working spouses and families, and in the end, it's just not worth it. And so the long-term effect and the current effect is negative. What I like about the language is here, and as you recall, some of you recall the discussions of, hey, how much should we authorize? And that's all out of here. And it's really saying, hey, A&I, HRD, you promulgate the rules. We're good with that. I think that's what a centralized HRD, human resources, should be doing for us. And I think one of the things, about the may pay at the discretion of the administrative head is that's my task to say, yes, we should pay it or not. If somebody gets a new job in the same town, we will not, we aren't going to pay moving expenses. But if we're moving them from, one town in this state to another, as for developmental reasons and for getting the right position, then I think we should be paying that. Mr. Chairman, that's maybe a quick recap. Let me just, with your permission, see if Mr. Rossetti, what he would add.
Mr. Rossetti.
Mr. Chairman, Taylor Rossetti, Support Services at YDOT. The director did cover that very well, and I think we have seen this enough, so I'm glad we're having this discussion. The only comment that I would have is that I think the policy discussion that Ms. Jarvis mentioned about having the word policy rather than rule was through working with A&I, and as this is a bill that is prescriptive to them. I would be curious what their take on is that amendment or the bill as it's stated there on page 4. Obviously, you guys are aware, I mean, we had a discussion about the towing rule and how long and that process can take. Sometimes by putting things into the rule promulgating process, it can actually make it very, very difficult to change. If there is a way to support having that be a policy, I do think that's probably in everyone's best interest.
So Taylor, that you're comfortable with the shall that was pointed out by the senator and the may on page 2, two different scenarios. It feels like that gives good flexibility to our agencies.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think the whole reason this discussion came up was shall was the only thing that was there before. And it caused some confusion about what could happen if the director wanted to do something, right? That shall scenario is literally the solution that we discussed, right? Representative Stivar explained it very well. I tell Trooper A, you're moving from Pinedale to Cheyenne. That is a shall situation. This is a different situation.
If you want to stay with us, you got to come to Cheyenne.
Absolutely.
Right.
This may allows the director to make those decisions.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the risk of asking an obvious question, why wouldn't the state of Wyoming already have a policy on moving its employees regardless of the situation? I mean, we have other departments that move employees around to develop them, as the good director indicates. So, I mean, wouldn't HR, Human Resources, already have a policy?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, the statute that's before you does lay out the required time to do this, right? Obviously, the transfer scenario. We do currently have a position open where we did work with them and did get permission to do moving expenses, but that is not really outlined in a policy or procedure at this point in time.
Heather, do we have anybody still on board with us from A&I? Okay. We'll have to catch up with with that agency a little bit later on, Representative, but good question. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know we're pushed for time, but generally, what line item would this come out of in your budget, these moving expenses? Because I know that your budget can probably absorb these moving expenses, but there are smaller state agencies that may not be able to absorb moving expenses. So generally, do most agencies handle the moving expenses out of the same budget line item, or how is that handled? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker, I really can't speak to the mechanics of what another agency might do. And you are right, our budget does have a little bit of flexibility, but I could see this expense coming out of, depending on what you were paying for, out of both the 100 and the 900 series, depending on what you were actually paying for. I do think that, again, the way that language is set up with the May, that allows a director to plan for these things, for those crucial recruiting opportunities, and can actually build up those dollar amounts in those accounts in order to accommodate this. Would it be more complicated for some agencies than us? Yes, but this certainly would allow that agency head who is tasked with this function to be able to make that decision within his or her agency.
Senator McEwen.
I need a little help with this, please. I understand the main, but I don't like it because every situation you've described already falls into the shall. If you're gonna move them for professional development or to shape your workforce, you're basically reassigning them. And that's why I'm hung up on the May. I don't see the need for it. Can you help explain that one to me?
Mr. Chairman, Senator McEwen, that is actually a great question, because I do think that shall has caused some problems in the past. The may, what this may is allowing us to do is that may scenario is describing where we advertise a position and recruit for that position amongst the entire universe of candidates. In that instance, if that position is deemed critical, the director would be able to make the decision that whoever potentially gets into that position is eligible for moving expenses. So that is both an outside candidate and an inside candidate. Currently, the reassignment is not considered a competitive recruitment. The reassignment is absolutely different in the current system than an open recruited for position.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could just add to that, what he says is right. What I'll tell you is our experience has been, as we work this, is, we advertise a job. Let's just say, it's for a trooper captain in Pinedale. And several individuals put in for it. They're selected for it. We pick one. He happens to live in Laramie. And so we said, okay, you're moving to Pinedale for promotion. That is disallowed because that individual applied for the job. And so the legal definition of the shall turned into, that's not for the good, that's not for the benefit of the state of Wyoming. That's for the benefit of the individual. Thus, the shall did not apply. And so we were not authorized to pay that moving expense. That's what started this whole process, saying, well, how do we pay the moving expense then? Because it's for the good of Wyoming in my mind, but the legal interpretation of that statute said, no, we will not allow it. And so that's what got us here today.
So Director, just to add to what you're explaining, I think the way it helps me to think about, if that individual in Laramie, you call him and say, or her, and say, we've selected you for this position. It might be that she would say, I appreciate that, but I'm not sure that I can really afford to move my family to Pinedale. At which time you as the director could say, well, I tell you what we'll do. If you'll accept the position, we'll help you with some moving expenses to get there. And it might put you over the hump. Isn't that right?
Mr. Chairman, actually, no, the issue becomes if we internally select somebody and, in other words, Taylor and I, Mr. Rossetti and I might sit here and here's everybody who's in our organization. And we say, I need a captain All right, I'm picking him with no interview and no application
No, I
process.
get the shall.
Yeah.
That's a shall.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a may. I'm talking about an open recruitment and you get somebody that you've decided you want to try to hire. And they say, well, I'd take it, but I can't afford to move there. It gives you the opportunity to
absolutely,
maybe sweeten the package so that you can get her to go. to
Mr.
find it,
Chairman,
right?
that's exactly correct.
Okay,
That's
thanks.
exactly correct.
Anything else, committee? Thank you too. Really appreciate it. And we do not have anybody from A&I. Let's go to public comment on the bill. Is there any public comment on the moving expenses bill? Anybody virtually? Okay, we will close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill? Hold on a second. Okay, moved by Murphy, seconded by Anderson. Discussion. Okay, let's go through this bill page by page. Any proposed amendments for page 1? Any proposed amendments for page 2? Page 3? Page 4? And finally, page 5. Okay, are you ready for a question on the bill? Okay. Could you please call question roll on the bill, Heather? Thank you.
This is a roll call vote for 23 LSO 0014.5, state employee moving expenses. Senator Anderson.
Aye.
Senator Furphy. Senator McEwen. Senator Pappas. Representative Baker. Representative Burt. Representative Henderson. Representative McGuire.
Excuse.
Representative Obermueller. Representative Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Romero Martinez.
Absent.
Representative Stivar.
No.
Co-chairman Burkhart.
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
Aye.
That passed.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Committee, that's going to wrap it up for today. We've got other things that we can attend tonight that I hope everybody will stop by and do that. I think just a couple of things. I wanted to remind the committee that that there are a couple of bills regarding special license plates. We were to consider those at this meeting, but the co-chairman and I have decided that we will push those to November. One of those was a bill brought by Senator Schuler last year that made it through the process, and it was organ donation license plate. And it was the decision of the co-chairman to bring that back during this interim. So that one will go forward to November. We've been requested to draft a bill that allows for special license plates for our community colleges. That bill, it seems to me, would do well to be considered at the same time. And I also think that would give us the opportunity to take up any issues with the license plate photographs. That information that was presented to us today, if we need to modify something via statute, take the word color out of the statute. I think it would do well for us to draft that little bill. Does everybody remember the picture being black and white versus color? Those three bills all deal with driver's licenses. So let's push those to our third meeting. I think we can deal with them fairly quickly in November. That's really all we had, except for the two bills that we did not get to today. The lightweight trailers bill was also a bill that made it through the process last year and died for on third reading. Didn't die on third reading. It didn't make it up in the Senate. Heather, you had your hand raised.
Mr. Chairman, there are 4 bills we didn't get to today.
Winter road closures, it's my intention that we move that to November.
Okay,
And highway safety child restraints, we'll also move that to November.
okay,
Okay, so that leaves us two bills to start with in the morning.
okay.
Lightweight trailers, permanent registration, and road and bridge construction alternative contracting. So out of the blocks tomorrow morning, committee, we'll start and do, Senator Pats.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to make just an announcement to the committee. If you recall, I had a bill last year, Senate File 17, was automated transport of cargo goods. And we passed that out of the committee and it died. It did not get considered at the committee of the whole in the Senate. It just ran out of time and didn't die. I'm going to bring it back, but I'm not asking you to make it a committee bill. I'm going to just bring it as a personal bill. But I would hope that the committee would continue to endorse it like you did last year and support it. In fact, if you, I know Mr. Chairman said he'd want to co-sponsor with me. I'm be glad to have anybody on the committee would like to co-sponsor it. I'm just going to run it as a private bill because we've just got too many bills on the committee.
Thank you for that, Senator. I appreciate it. We'll look forward to seeing that bill as an individual bill. It was a good one. Committee, anything else for the good of the cause? Heather Squared, anything? Okay, thank you both over there. And committee, we'll see everybody this evening probably at a little reception that for us, and then we'll get started at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning again, just in an effort to try to get through everything. Yeah.
I think we should start.
I'd get shot. Thank you, everybody.